Call this meeting to order. This is City Council work session for October 19th, 2020. And the meeting is now called to order, and a roll call, please, Sue.
Councilor Coefield.
Here.
Sorry, I didn't have my sheet out. Councilor Yarnell Holloman.
Here.
Councilor Martinez Plancarte.
Present.
Mayor Rogers.
Present.
Councilor Bacon.
Here.
Councilor Finley.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, all present duly noted with the exception of District 5, which is vacant at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, review of the council agenda and meeting. I've got a couple of items for this evening. We'd like to move the new business item. Staff would hope to move it to before the public hearings. So item 8A will move to before item 7. And then let's see, discussion on a committee appointment process. We'd like to add that committee appointment process under the council business session during the business portion of this evening's meeting. Anything else other than that, folks?
Mr. Mayor, I have had 2 late registrants for public comment. Lisa
Okay.
Rogers would like to speak to Ordinance 2020-2860 on the construction excise tax, and Ezra Hammer has sent a chat saying he would like to speak both on that ordinance and the SDC ordinance 2869.
Okay, there's a hammer. Okay, awesome. I got it. All right, and then now we're on, I guess, unless anybody else has anything else for business items, the council agenda in the meeting. Nope, hearing none. All right, anything for Matt on the August 2020 fund financial statements? I'll just comment to say that I was glad to see that revenue was above projection, or at least from the county property taxes. So that's good, I guess. So there you go. Anything else, Matt? Or
I'm glad to see it's not terribly over our estimate, which means we were reasonably accurate.
right, exactly. I guess that's the other part of forecasting, right? So there you go. All right, anything else, folks, on that? Okay, moving right along and on to presentations, economic opportunities analysis briefing. Mr. Rux.
Thank you, Mayor. So Doug Rux, Community Development Director. I think I'll start and step back a little bit since we have a new council member who has not been fully involved and engaged in this particular process. So the city had budgeted to update its economic opportunities analysis as part of our program to evaluate if we need to do an urban growth boundary expansion or not. And so we entered into a contract with Echo Northwest back in November of 2019 to do that. Subsequently, we got a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development that helped pay for some of the cost to do this particular analysis. And Echo Northwest has been engaged with us since the very beginning. A Citizens Advisory Committee was established for this. It was brought forward by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. And so they've met 5 times. We also established a technical advisory committee. And the list of those people are actually in the draft of the economic opportunities analysis. And the TAC has met 4 times. We've had some challenges with COVID-19, of course. We had to go Zoom on all meetings, so face-to-face stopped. We had to reschedule meetings to adjust schedules and timelines because of the pandemic, but we've continued to move forward. So what I'd like to do tonight is give you an update of where we're at in this process, which we are rapidly moving towards conclusion, and I'll get to that at the end. So Sue, next slide, please. And then the next one. So tonight I want to go over our site needs analysis, kind of where we're at. Some of this will be a recap from a prior presentation that I did. I want to talk about our measures on how we accommodate industrial land need. And then I'll just briefly kind of talk about the draft EOA. There's a lot of information in that 95-page document, but it still is in draft form and we're collecting comments, and I will get to that later as well. So Sue, next slide. And then the next one. Okay. So in 2016, Council accepted our economic development strategy. And within that document, it had targeted industries identified. So as we've gone through this EOA process, we've used those categories. We actually spent some time with our consultants and with SEDCOR, which is the Strategic Economic Development Corporation. And we collapsed some of the categories for efficiency purposes, really. So what you see is our target industries are advanced and general manufacturing, technology and high-tech manufacturing, food, beverage processing and agricultural products, forestry and wood products, and aviation-related industries. So the sub-bullets that you see under there are actually examples of the types of industries under those broader categories. And of course, Newberg is known to be to have its cluster for dental equipment and machine shops. Technology is something we've been striving for since I've been here. Part of that is tied to the Chehalem accelerator, and we started that about 4 years ago. The food and beverage, we have that occurring here, and as well as manufacturing. Some lighter aspects on forestry, and then of course we have Sportsman's Air Park, which provides that opportunity for the aviation. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that's a little bit hard to read, but there was work that was done in 2015 around the state, looking at different aspects of different types of industries and what their site characteristics and needs are. So this is a very large table. We've tried to compress down to just a few rows. It does have the correct columns, but not all of the rows. And so it started to look at, production manufacturing, so heavy and high tech, and what are those site needs? So you got some examples of 10 to 100 acres or 5 to 100 acres. Slopes got to be relatively flat. There's information about proximity transportation-wise. Sometimes it's to an interstate, sometimes it's to a state highway. Drill down further, down on the bottom row of the screen, it talks about site utilities. And so it starts to lay out what size of infrastructure do you need for sewer lines and water lines to serve these different industry sectors. So this chart gives us production and manufacturing, value-added manufacturing, food processing and advanced, light and flex industrial, that has the general manufacturing, business administration services, warehousing and distribution, really logistics. And then there's a specialty category. And the one you might see is unmanned vehicles or data centers. Data centers have been inquired about in Newberg. So there's a lot of depth of information that we were able to draw from on the different site needs. Next slide, please. So this one, we took the IFA table and then we took our targeted industries. And so our industries are on the left. The IFA information is on the right. And so you can start to see where ours line up with that state analysis. And so wherever you see a green check mark. And so if you look at it, food processing, we've only got one check mark out of the different categories. But if you look at advanced manufacturing, we have components that fall into that advanced in general, food and beverage, forestry and wood products, high tech and aviation. That's probably our most noted of the various categories. We don't have anything in the regional warehouse component. That's something we probably won't see. A big regional warehouse, you won't see an Amazon do something here. It's not close enough to an interstate, but some smaller distribution and local warehousing and so forth is an opportunity for Newberg. Next slide. So then we drilled down further and took the information from the IFA table and our targeted industries and started to look at these site sizes. And you can see there's a range. General manufacturing, looking for 5 to 25. Food and beverage, 5 to 25. Forestry, 5 to 25. The tech category, 5 to 100. And aviation is, again, 5 to 25. You can see that industry likes to be on relatively flat sites, ranging anywhere from 0 to 7%. Sometimes rail access is preferred, and that's something that we do have in some of our industrial area is rail access. The highway access, and this is to the interstate within 20 miles to 30 miles. High tech, you can get up to 60. I always remind people that our southern industrial area is 12 miles from an interstate, going down 219 and then going east out to the Donald Aurora interchange. And then we pulled out information from the IFA table and looked at what those specialty utility needs are for these different industry sectors. The aviation is very dependent upon the type of business as well as the forestry. I think one of the ones to pay note of is the food and beverage, is that you can see there's water is a big issue, and having a dependency on that. On your manufacturing and in your tech, is you're looking for that electricity redundancy, and you also have this need for natural gas. Almost every industry is looking for telecom, so that fiber. Do you have fiber? Can you provide fiber to my site? So this was key information to share with both our technical committee and with our citizens committee about what these industry needs are. Sue, next slide, please. So now we're going to talk a bit about the industrial land demand and the sufficiency of what Newberg has or does not have, because it cuts both ways. Next slide. So the analysis has shown us that we need, we're projecting 2,557 industrial employees over the next 20 years. Based upon the slides I just showed you, those site sizes range from around 5 to 25 acres. It's always important to note that we'll have some that need bigger sites, and we'll have some that we're going to need some smaller sites. So that led us then to do an analysis about what do we have and how many sites do we have located in Newberg. Next slide, Sue. So we did something different than what I've done in other EOAs, is we did an analysis looking at other communities that have some similar site characteristics as Newberg. So we looked at Albany, in Corvallis, in McMinnville, in Sherwood, Wilsonville, Salem, Tualatin, and Woodburn. You may ask, well, why Corvallis? And well, Corvallis has got a larger site where HP is located. If you look at Albany, it's got some heavier industry. If you look at Wilsonville, they were pretty much a large industrial employment center as they've tried to diversify their land base and their activities. Salem, we looked at that not because of a comparability in size of population, and we did not do this based on population, is looking at the types of businesses and the size of sites that those businesses need. Similar with Tualatin, and then Woodburn has a variety of attributes that ended up being similar to what we have in Newberg. From this analysis, we were able to break this down and identify that we have sites that are smaller than 5 acres. We've got sites that are larger than 50 acres, and then we have sites that are kind of in between, at 5 to 25, which I mentioned in the previous slide, and then those site sizes in that 25 to 50 acres. Next slide, Sue. So here we took that information and tried to give you tried to give our citizens committee and our technical committee a visual kind of what that looked like. So on the left is the number of industrial employees, and this is based on 2018 data. It's always important to note that this data comes from the Oregon Employment Department. We can't not drill down into detail on individual businesses, but we can categorize them across industry sectors because the information is confidential. But you can see in kind of what the lighter blue on my screen is kind of a turquoise color. You can see the sites that are less than 5 acres and get an idea of the number of employees that are located in those various communities. And you can see many of them are, under 2,000 employees, definitely in less than the 5 acre site. And then you get a couple in the Tualatin and Salem area where you've got a higher employment number based upon those sites that are less than 5 acres. And you can see the chart that the purple is, sites that are 50 acres and above. And you can only see a couple of communities have that: Woodburn, Salem, and Wilsonville. But most of it falls in the 5 to 50 acre size. Knowing that I came from Tualatin, we spent a lot of time working on the industrial stuff. And so the information that was projected here is consistent from my time in that particular organization. For Newberg, you can see we've got right around 3,000 employees, but most of that is pretty equally separated between sites that are less than 5 acres and sites that are less than 5 to 25. Next slide, Sue. So this is the table this is a table that further breaks this down. So now we're looking at site size in acres. Excuse me, and the number of sites. And so if you were to look at Newberg, we've got 113 sites that are less than 5 acres in size. We've got 7 that are in the 5 to 25, nothing in the 25 to 50. And then the 2 larger ones really apply to the mill site and to ADEC. And then you can kind of compare that, and let's compare it to Woodburn as an example. They've got 106 sites less than 5 acres, 11 in the 5 to 25. They've got 3 in the 25 to 50, and then they've got 2 in the 50 plus. And you can see there's some other communities that do not have the larger sites as well. But overall, we looked at that, 10 large sites based upon this analysis of over 50 acres, 15 in the 25 to 50, but predominantly the acreage sizes were in that less than 5 and then up to 25 acres. Next slide. So then we looked at site sizes again, but now we're looking at the average of those site sizes. And I think what's important is if you go down to the bottom row of that is that when we averaged these out, it came out to just a slightly under 1 acre was the average for sites that are under 5 acres in size. For those that were in 5 to 25, they were just slightly under 10. For the 25 to 50 category, it was almost 33. And then the 50 plus was just a little bit over 92 acres. And again, you can see, where Newberg falls in that. We were at 0.6 for the less than 5, 7.9 for the 5 to 25. The 25 and above is, we didn't have anything in that category. Next slide. And the next slide then is a graphic showing that same information for those who like the visuals rather than looking at tables and charts. Next slide, Sue. So these site characteristics. So again, those comparable cities. So we looked at the percent of employment that was existing in each of those sites. And so you can see that 51% was less than 5, 41, 5 to 25, 25 to 40 is 4%, and 50 acres or more was only 4%. And then we looked at the number of employees per site. So this is not by acre, but it's per site. And you can see the data. And so we averaged that out again. And so this is a different way of looking at it. So it's that, a little less than 1 for the less than 5, a little less than 10 for the 5 to 25, and a little over 32, almost 33 for the 25 to 50. Next slide. So again, if we go back and we look at our projections of 2,557 new industrial employees over the next 20 years, and that's from 2021 through 2041, we had to adjust our numbers slightly from the previous slide to make sure that the number of employees lined up with the percentages. And we've had a couple conversations with our committees on this, and they understand there's a slight adjustment. So what we're identifying is that our percent of employment as we move forward on sites that are less than 5 acres will be 46%. And that's just slightly under 1,200 employees. On the 5 to 25, it's 41%, which is slightly over 1,000 employees. And then the 25 to 50 acre sites is only 5% and 128 employees. And then the 50 acre more is 8% which is 205 acres. And then we looked at the employees per site. So that's kind of going back to the previous slide and looking at that. So you can see those numbers. And then what's the land need? And so using these average site sizes, it was determined, the analysis showed that we needed 71 acres of sites that are less than 5, 79 in the 5 to 25, 33 in the 25 to 50, and 92 acres in the 50 or more. Next slide. So then we got to do some deeper analysis. And so then we had to try to figure out what is our true need. So we had to go back to our buildable lands inventory, which we've shared with you before. And when we talk about vacant sites, we're talking about both vacant sites and partially vacant sites. And so if we have a need of 79 for sites less than 5 acres, and we have 22 acres of vacant and partially vacant sites, that means we have a deficit of 57 sites. And so you can see those numbers in this table. So in that less than 5 category, our net number of acres needed was 51. In the 5 to 25, it was 69. Our 25 to 50, it's 33. And our 50 or more, it's 92. So what that tells us in the far right column and at the bottom is a need for 246 acres of industrial land. That's an important number because I'll talk about this in a little bit. Next slide, Sue. So from there, we needed to move to the policy discussion. And what policies do we need to have in place in order to accommodate this 2,557 employees on 246 acres of land need? Next slide. So this took us back to the work that we've been doing over the last 5 years. And so again, going back to our economic development strategy in 2016. We started work on that in 2015. Our downtown improvement plan, we started that in 2015 and finished that up in 2016. And of course, the most recently is our riverfront master plan. And so we posed questions to our technical committee and our citizens committee on some ideas of some potential measures. So this first one is a preservation policy. And should we be preserving sites over 10 acres to limit it so that it doesn't have what we're calling complete conversion? In complete conversion, think of it as, well, you had, let's say arbitrarily, you had a site that was 11 acres and somebody came in and says, I want to change 11 acres to residential. That would be a complete conversion to another use. So we asked them, should we have some kind of policies in place that if you have sites over this size, is that we're protecting those. So we have land to be able to accommodate that industrial over the course of the next 20 years. And then we asked about master planning for business and industrial parks. And this led to some interesting discussions about, let's say somebody came in and wanted to do a 5-acre business park. Do we really want to have them have a requirement they have to go through a master planning process in order to develop that 5 acres or that 10 acres? That adds time, it adds cost. And are we missing potential market opportunities? And through the feedback we received from both of the committees is if there is a policy on master planning, it should be at the district level. And the example that was brought up is like, well, what you just did with the Riverfront Master Plan, you looked at that and you took the industrial portion to the east of River Street. And though you identified 21.5 acres for mixed employment, the base uses are industrial, and the balance of that site going over to Winooski stays as industrial. And so master planning at the level we did is something that helps because it provided information about what transportation needs are, what infrastructure for sewer, water, storm drainage, wastewater needs are. Next slide. Then we had a conversation about land to rezone and avoiding downzoning. So this inherently comes up across the state that if you have a deficiency in your industrial land and or your commercial land, if we're looking at the employment side as well for commercial, is, you know, do you change commercial to industrial? Do you change residential to industrial? There are some Measure 49 issues that come up with that. But that's also why we're updating our housing needs analysis from 2019. We're doing that buildable lands inventory update and the population update to see what those numbers will look like. So you want to look at it as a holistic package, looking at what your residential land needs are, as well as your employment land needs. Then one of the other suggestions of a measure was, well, consider looking at urban renewal as that catalyst for that redevelopment to occur. And of course, we are looking at an urban renewal program. So the council has accepted a feasibility study. You formed an urban renewal agency, and we're now engaged in the process of preparing a plan and report. Another one that was identified is with the bypass. There's actually, if you dig into the documents, there are interchange management plans that are required. And those are to address having the right kinds of uses. So think about the bypass at Highway 219 as an example, is that you could overwhelm your state highway system if you allow the wrong types of uses that are high trip generators. So, you know, you wouldn't want a shopping complex next to your interchange because they produce a lot of traffic, a lot more than what you would get out of industrial. And so we actually have an overlay for 2 interchange management plan areas, but those plans have not been created yet. That's something that needs to be done in the future. Another thing that came up from the discussions was talking about environmental lands. So one idea was, well, should we have any regulations or policies, I should say, that get to tree preservations or not? And that's been something that's come up before past city councils. What about wetlands? Should we have some policies about wetlands? And that could lead you down the path of doing a local wetland inventory, identifying what wetlands could be filled, which ones to be preserved. We talked through that we already have a stream corridor. We have policies and regulations for stream corridors that protect those elements, which often have wetlands in them. As in some cases, they also have floodplains. So we've given both of the committees a little bit of time to come up with some additional recommendations to this preliminary list. And we're waiting in the next day or two to get that feedback from both our citizens and our technical committee. Next slide, Sue. So this leads us kind of to where we're at in this process before I kind of get into the draft of the EOA. So the final meeting of our technical and citizens committees is scheduled for December 1st of 2020. After that, at that meeting, the hope is that they will formulate a recommendation. That recommendation will go on to the Planning Commission for review and consideration, and then it will come to the City Council. And we're looking at January of 2021, bringing those recommendations to you. We asked our Technical and Citizens Committee to review the 95-page document that's in your packet and provide us feedback on where we may be missing something, need some clarification on documents, if there needs to be some additional analysis and so forth. As of today, I have received some feedback from Friends of Yamhill County and Thousand Friends, and I have received some feedback from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I've had a couple of our committee members provide some high-level feedback as well. So as to the EOA document, as I mentioned, it has a lot of information in it. But it's by design, and it needs to meet state requirements. So there's a section that talks about factors affecting economic growth in the future. And as part of that, our EOA has to look at national, state, and regional trends in economic development activities. And so our consultants have gone through and done an analysis looking at all of that. Of course, it often comes up in conversations about, well, how does the COVID-19 affect this? When we were putting this information together, we actually talked with the employment department, and that's when the unemployment rate was above 12% in the state of Oregon, and it's now dropped down to less than 9% in Yamhill County. But we said, if we took our employment number, so if I went back to that 2,557 number, we actually, that includes a 10% discount or reduction, anticipating the COVID-19. But you also have to remember that this analysis is over a 20-year period. You know, could somebody say that the pandemic is going to go on for the next 20 years? Someone could say that. Could someone say it's going to go on for the next 2 to 3 years? Yes, someone could say that. Will it have some impact on the economy? Yes, it will. But the likelihood that it's going to, you know, last for a 20-year period, and we got some feedback from the state on that aspect as well, that even said, well, why are you even doing the 10%? Well, we think it's the appropriate thing to do given the circumstances we're in today. We also then drilled down in that report and looked at what's going on in Newberg and Yamhill County. A lot of data is reported at the county level and not at the city level, but then there is some data at the city level. So we were able to access local data. We have done that. And then we looked at our competitive advantages. And again, so part of that is going back to some of the SWOT analysis that we did when we put together the economic development strategy in 2016, which I should note we updated in November of 2019 to reflect community feedback from the community visioning program. Through this process in previous presentations, the population forecast that we have to use is from Portland State University, from the Population Research Center. And so we're taking the safe harbor approach. So we're looking at an average annual growth rate in the population of 1.39% over the 20-year period. The document identifies that on our commercial side is that we have a surplus of 20 acres of commercial land over the 20-year period from 2021 to 2041. But it could be 3 or 4 years and that dynamic could change and we'd be in a position of being in a deficit of commercial land. It depends on the private marketplace and what they do with that commercial land and the timing for when it develops. Then there's a section that deals on industrial land, which the slides I presented tonight give you a picture of what those numbers look like. And so that current projected deficit of 246 acres of industrial land. Of course, then there's all the technical stuff we presented to you before, the buildable lands inventory. So there are maps that show where there are vacant lands, partially vacant industrial lands and commercial lands. We've taken out constrained lands where we have stream corridors, steep slopes, landslide areas to all get down to a net acreage number. There's a section on Sportsman Air Park, and there's some gaps that we still need to fill in on that. And so if you read through the document, that actually has some notes. And the consultants will be working on filling in those gaps for the December 1st meeting of the Citizens Committee. And we still have to develop a short-term land supply analysis. But that will come after we get all the feedback back on the draft EOA. And then I've given you some ideas on the land sufficiency and some of the feedback we received from our committees. And we'll also get feedback from interested parties on this EOA process. So with that, I think, Mayor, I will stop. See if there are any questions.
All right. That is your cue, folks, if you have questions. Well, anybody? Okay, Bryce.
Doug, thank you for your work. It's clear you are good at your job. I appreciate that. I like people that are good at their jobs. They make my job easier. So thank you for that work. I wonder for folks who are listening or watching, it seems like there's a significant emphasis on the need to increase industrial land, right? And I know even one of the suggestions was potentially shifting zoning from commercial, though I know you mentioned there are a couple measures that might make that complicated. But for those who are watching that haven't had access to a lot of this information before, could you speak to more to like why industrial sites? So you noted a few numbers around total jobs available in industrial sites as opposed to more commercial sites relative to size. But could you speak more to the overall benefit to that? Because I know coming in, had I not read that, I would have thought, oh, like having more commercial sites would make more sense. That's more jobs that would be accessible to this more local community. I think in my mind, I think of Newberg as a more sort of commercial area. So can you speak to the overall benefit of increasing and investing more into industrial sites?
Yes, I can. So one of the things this community, out of our community visioning program, is talking about being able to live and work in Newberg. Yeah. So if you look in the document, you see there's about 8,600, a little over 8,600 people get up every day and drive out of Newberg to go to work someplace else.
Yep.
There's about 6,600 people that commute into Newberg to work every day. We have a little less than 2,000 people who actually live in Newberg and work in Newberg. So there's been this perception that if you live in Newberg, you work in Newberg. The data tells us from the census something very, very different than that. We are part of a commute shed, and people are commuting out of here and going into the Portland metro area. They're going to Salem. They're going to McMinnville. Conversely, we have people coming out for management jobs, coming out of Portland into businesses in Newberg. And so we're in this bigger, broader commute shed. So conversations that we've had over the past 5 years with Planning Commission is to be a more balanced community and to provide family wage jobs. And so if you look at the job strata, and if you were working in a fast food restaurant, you were at towards the bottom of that pay scale. But if you are in a manufacturing job, tendencies are going to make a wage that's enough to be able to support your family. And so there's the data that's in the report that talks about what our average wage is and compares that to the county and the state.
Right.
And
which I believe, if I read it correctly, we're slightly above average. Is that right?
We're a little below, state. Yeah, we're below.
Oh, sorry.
State.
I was looking compared to Yamhill, where I think it says Newberg average wage is $43,480, and that Yamhill's $43,299.
Yeah, but we're below the state.
Oh, the broader state. Gotcha.
The broader state as a whole. Mm-hmm. So the goal of this document is to be able to provide job opportunities for family wage jobs. Mm-hmm. And that way, if we do our work correctly on the housing side, because employers want to make sure that there's housing that's affordable for their workers, and we've got a balance between the two of these, and so that you could actually live here and work here. The commercial side, when you dig into the report, and it also talks about this changing dynamic, and what's happening before the pandemic is more people are buying online. And so that affects brick and mortar. And so the construction of actual physical buildings to have those retail businesses. So we have downtown, we're trying to get more of that. We have a limited supply out on Highway 99. And so when you think about where we have commercial land that's available to develop, it's up on College Street in Mountain View, and it's on Highway 99 across from the hospital. Those are our two large commercial sites that are available. But the consultants dug in and looked at that whole issue of, online buying and so forth, and that does impact. And so all of a sudden now, if you're trying to build a bricks and mortar retail, the rents that you're trying to command, there's not enough rooftops to be able to support those businesses to be able to pay their lease or rent on that particular space. So that's some of the tensions that are occurring currently in Newberg. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And if I may ask one quick follow-up question, that is incredibly helpful. And I think it makes sense, and I would fully be in support of creating jobs that allow people to live here and work here. I live here and work here, and it means more time in the community with family. It's wonderful. One thing you noted, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. I think you said around 8,600 folks in Newberg are leaving Newberg to work elsewhere, and we have around 6,600 or so folks that are coming from elsewhere to work in Newberg. Is that right?
Yeah, let me clarify that. I just opened it up. So we have 6,613 that commute in, 8,221 that commute out, and 1,942 that live and stay here. If I compare those numbers, and these are from the American Community Survey, if I compare those numbers over the last 4 or 5 years, the trend is more and more people are commuting out. We're getting a little bit of an increase of people commuting in. Those that are living and working here is staying relatively flat.
Yeah.
Another key piece of that as you dig into the census data is that if you live here and work here, you make less than if you live here and drive out someplace else to work, or if you live someplace else and drive into Newberg to work. So that's another thing of creating those family wage jobs so that you're increasing that household income so that you can live here and work here. Another key component of this, and the committees have talked about this, is when you get into the data, it shows that historically we were around 35% of our employment base was industrial.
Okay.
And that's toggled back, and I'm trying to remember the exact number, but it's right around 25%. What happened in that analysis period of 2008 to 2018, we lost 2 large manufacturing companies. So Suntron closed and the mill closed. In that same period, the other industrial companies added about 260 jobs. So if those companies would have stayed in place, hopefully we would have been able to count that. But those 2 big employers that went away pulled us back in our industrial base. And so aspirationally, where we're trying to go is get back to that 35%.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And part of why I ask clarification around folks leaving as opposed to folks coming in is because it makes sense that we would want to build opportunities for family, wages. But I'm curious if the assumption that building here in Newberg means that those businesses will then also hire in Newberg, and what protections might be in place to prevent these businesses from, hiring folks outside of Newberg, thereby extending this gap that we're seeing where more folks are moving into work, but don't necessarily live here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger and have the exact answer to that question. So here's what I'm seeing happening in the economy today. This is my perspective, is as housing prices increase in the Portland metro area, families move out a little bit further. They can get a home they can afford. They might be able to get a little bit bigger home than what they could afford. They might be able to get a little bit bigger lot size than what they could in the metro area. And they're trading that off for the commute to go back. But then you hit on it is that they're commuting. So as soon as they get home, especially in the wintertime, I get home at 6 o'clock. I open up my garage door. I drive in my garage door goes closed. I go in and have dinner, and then I go off and do my kids' stuff. And I'm not necessarily as connected in the community as we would like you to be. But from an employer's perspective, is they're looking for the skilled workforce. And so we have to look at a skilled workforce work shed. And that typically ranges somewhere, depending on the company, anywhere from 15 to 30 miles. Some companies will actually look out to 60. And so they're looking for the skilled workforce. So we're right on the edge of that. But at the same time, in conversations we're having with the university and PCC, is by moving towards this industrial land need based on the numbers that were presented, is making sure that we have educational programs so that people have the skill sets to be able to go to work at those companies that are either expanding here or companies that would relocate here. And so there, you can never just pull on one lever and say, this is the answer. You're pulling on multiple levers all the time to try to make that balance. And I've talked with the president of the university about this in the past. I've talked with the president of Portland Community College about this in the past, and we will continue to talk about that.
You know, the other lever that you touched on and has been and continues to be is if you don't have the housing for the workers, it makes it very difficult for, you know, for these companies to continue to hire. And that's, you know, we've been seeing more and more of that. So anyway, other questions, folks, for Doug? Okay, Doug, thank you. That was excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you to Echo Northwest. And if you don't mind, if I could indulge, here's the members of the committee, the volunteers that have been doing this work: Gene Pyros, Kurt Walker, Alan Rout, Philip Higgins, Rob Halliburton, Carr Biggerstaff, Bob Woodruff, Alvin Elbert, Keith Hansen, Isa Pena, and Jim Bush. So thank you to all of them as well. Can't do it without you all. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Anything else, folks? I've got 6:48 on my calendar here. And our regular business session then will start at 7. So anybody who showed up early, Mr. Ross, I see you there, and maybe EC as well. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock, and then we'll be on to the business portion of the evening. So everybody else, just stop your video, mute your phone, but don't sign off. And we'll see you at 7 or in 12 minutes. Well, it's 7 o'clock. Let's roll.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a City Council business session for October 19th, 2020. Let's please call the meeting to order, and a roll call, please, Sue.
Councilor Coefield. Councilor Yarnell Holloman. Okay, I think that was Bryce.
I got present.
Councilor Martinez Plancarte.
Present.
Thank you, Jules. Mayor Rogers.
Present.
Councilor Bacon.
Here.
Here.
It's having a hard time maneuvering that button.
And Councilor Finley.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think I missed roll call. I'm Councilor Coefield this year.
And Elise has two places and one is not muted.
Oh, yeah. There you go. All right. And I'm glad to see we've got some junior city councilors on the call tonight, too. So that's always good to see. Hello, the youth, our future. All right, let's move now into the Pledge of Allegiance, please. All right. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Let us start with item 4 on the agenda, the Chamber Quarterly Report. And Josh, I believe that is you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I'm Josh Duder. If you haven't met me, I am now the Executive Director for the Chamber of Commerce. This is my first presentation, and I'm not quite sure what numbers you've already reviewed, and I'm not quite sure the process by which they've been presented to you in the past. So what information should I present?
Well, let's see. I think so you presented, you've got included here the quarterly statement for the Visitor Center, July through September.
Correct.
So maybe it would be good just to go through that. I mean, I see that it shows a loss. So maybe you could sort of explain that, particularly, I guess, in the loss on the year and how you expect to be able to deal with that, I guess.
Well, the loss, I'm not quite sure how to explain that one. I hadn't really prepared to explain the loss. The economics of that are something that the board of directors is dealing with. So we've sort of restructured the way that we operate, in that the board of directors is now taking over more operational control, and I'm sort of presenting the information or enacting what they want me to do during the day-to-day operations. So the visitor center was closed due to COVID. I think we all know how that's affected a lot of businesses and organizations. So a lot of our traffic, I mean, an incredible amount of traffic is down from where it was in years past. So moving forward, I think one of the ways that we'll address the losses of traffic here is to transform our visitor center into a community information center, and to attract not just tourists, but all members of our community, and make them feel welcome, that this is a place they can go to not just get information about, we've got these magazines to Bend and Seaside and Cannon Beach, but I want to provide information to even community members where to get a sandwich or the best place to get your brakes fixed. And so that's the type of information I want to put out here on the racks and make available here in the Chamber of Commerce in the Visitor Center.
All right, well, great. And this may be a tough question, but I'm just curious, your overhead is in utilities and all at 22,000. Is that a portion of the building, or do you know how much of the overhead that is?
I'm not quite sure how that's worked out. I know that when we moved from our previous location to this location, we paid quite a bit in TI or in construction costs for taking over tenant improvements. So some of that is a one-time cost. I think it was a huge chunk of money as a one-time cost, and that's probably what makes this look so overwhelmingly negative. And so one of the ways we'll address that is I'm personally getting on the phone and calling all chamber members, trying to improve our chamber member numbers so that our budget isn't as dependent on money from the city, and we can actually operate on money coming in from our chamber members.
Very good. Any other questions, folks, for Josh? All right, well, Josh, welcome. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Steph.
I had a question too.
I do have a question. How many chamber members are there, and what is anticipated as how much you could grow that?
Currently, we have 273 chamber members. We recently added 5 in the last month. When I first started 2.5 years ago, we had just over 300 chamber members. So we've lost a few in the last couple of years. The way I'm going to approach that is going back and really addressing value for the chamber membership at the lowest level, and call them and say, what did we miss? What can we do to improve? And just day to day offering a face that they can connect with and a voice that they can talk to on the phone.
And I have a follow-up question. Thank you. How many Spanish-speaking people do you have available for your Spanish-speaking businesses, and how many Spanish-speaking businesses are included in your membership?
That's a great question. It's not a demographic that we've traced, and we certainly don't have any bilingual employees of the Chamber of Commerce at the time. Our staff is currently myself as a full-time employee of the Chamber, and we have one other employee who works, I would say 0.33, and she's been on staff here for about 12 years, but neither of us speak any language proficiently other than English.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
At least.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to multi-use devices here. I guess, so just nice to meet you, Josh. Sorry, I don't think I've met you in person before, but I think we are meeting tomorrow. But so it sounds to me like your vision is more to transition to an information center, not a visitor center. Is that correct? Because I guess I would like to just open the conversation and I guess state to council, I would like us to think about if we're talking about information center versus visitor center, and if TLT dollars are appropriately spent in an information center. And if that's what we want to choose, then that's fine. But I think that we need to actually call that out. I do think there's value in uplifting different businesses that the chamber supports through an information center. I think that makes complete sense what you're saying. But I would just want to make sure that I was clear of the information center versus visitor center if TLT dollars are being spent.
Absolutely valid question. It is something that I'm pursuing, but it's an ongoing conversation with my board of directors, and I'm not in a position that I don't have the authority to make that decision on their behalf, but it is an ongoing conversation that our board of directors is having with other like-minded organizations in our community. So we're not alone. We're teaming up with our DMO, and we're teaming up with the Downtown Coalition, and we're teaming up with past members asking for advice. What is the best course of action for the Chamber of Commerce and for the Visitor Center? And we recognize, we look at the budget and we recognize, is it the best bang for your buck? And it is the #1 conversation that we have with our executive committee every week. And we're working on an answer. And I think we're set to start a discussion with the city about what that's going to look like. And I'm hoping that my board will provide some solid guidance shortly.
Bryce, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And also, acknowledge it's a hard position to be in, right? Stepping in and not always having the information. So I appreciate you being here. And also, would welcome you to come back or to reach out to us if there are things that you get information on. So my information is more around data. Again, you may not have this, and seeing the drop in terms of interactions makes sense given COVID. I'd be curious though to see more longitudinal data. So over the previous quarters, what has that interaction looked like in terms of unique users in particular, or unique users is the wrong term, but unique sort of visits. Because part of and I'm, squarely in the millennial, but my first thought is when I go to a new place, like I'm probably on Yelp. I don't really use TripAdvisor all that much, but yeah, I saw Molly, with their phone. Like I think I go to, like my phone to see what are other people saying and doing. I don't really use visitor centers that much, but again, that's just me. And so I think our data should inform decisions. So I'd be curious to see like what has the data shown in terms of usage over the course of time. And then, if the numbers aren't where you'd like it to be, how, you all are anticipating shifting that, because as far as I understand, TLT dollars are meant to go back into, so, getting more folks into Newberg and using Newberg, and again, people who live here as well. But I think ultimately usage is what I'm most curious about, if my question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it all ties in together. All of these questions weave together. I can tell you that there's a narrative-based presentation. I have a log of information here of these visits and phone calls. It's not nearly enough to qualify for the amount of money that we've received. I understand that. The users themselves or the visitors, it's a unique set, and certainly I understand the value of looking for information online. A lot of these visitors come in and they preface the conversation on a phone call or when they visit in person with, I don't use the internet, or
oh, sure.
I don't have a phone. It's interesting though, the larger number of people that do visit probably do have access to a phone or a computer. And so making this, the idea of a visitor center can't be completely dead because we are servicing a certain portion of our population, but it's no longer the majority of the visitors. And so I think reassessing how the money is distributed is certainly warranted. And I encourage that conversation.
Yeah.
Do you know what the percentage was of visitors pre-COVID versus residents?
I don't think that we tracked that information, but in that way, but we did the way that we marked visitors was using a door counter, right? So every time somebody came in the door, click, right? Every time somebody went out the door, click. But
that includes staff?
That includes staff. That includes anyone that came in for chamber business. That includes.
Okay, that's not accurate then, right?
Exactly. So we weren't necessarily tracking the information in the most accurate way. We have been keeping a logbook, so it gives us specifics, but that only goes back this quarter. So I don't have data that gives us what we're looking for in this conversation, which is unfortunate.
So what do you plan to do for that? Well, I'm just curious. How do you plan to find that, to track the data?
Right. So I've taken myself and our employee Patty, and we said not only visitors that come through the door, but every phone call or every email that comes in, anything that's a soft touch that is specifically geared towards the visitor center, we're now tracking that information. Now, previously,
Great.
we have been tracking people through the door, but not phone calls and not emails that were specifically asking for information about the visitor center. So we were just sort of tracking the narrative of anyone that came in the door. So the idea going forward is to track more accurately what the visits are about, and do it in a way that it's not invasive to them. So we ask them, where are they coming from? What are they up to? How can I help you? But not asking for their email and their home address and stuff like that.
That makes sense. Another two other thoughts, I'm sorry, relatively quickly. One is, my guess is a number of businesses in Newberg probably are also trying to track for themselves where, like, what is driving usage. And so I don't know if it's already there, but you might want to, work with some of the businesses to say, like, hey, could you add this to your satisfaction survey so that you can know on their end, hey, did somebody come and stay at their establishment or go to their business because of, information that they've gotten from the visitor center or from a phone call or whatever it may be, right? So that could be the other back end at which you get information that may not show up out on the front end, right? If that makes sense. The other thing
Absolutely. I'd say recently, my board president, Mark Moisan, and myself, we decided to get out of the office, stretch our legs, and we actually went door to door downtown, and we were asking business owners, what kind of visitors do you get? What kind of questions do they ask? What kind of information can we provide that you might not have the time? I mean, if you're a hairdresser, you might not have the time to give people directions to the best restaurants or multiple wineries. So we're asking them, how can we serve you with that type of information? And then you could either direct them to us, or we can create some sort of collateral, some sort of document that has a list of these points of interest and places to visit, but that also that might have a QR code or URLs that are, you can access that information that points them towards the DMO, to Taste Newberg. So then if they have questions about where do I go to stay or get a nice bottle of wine or a dinner, if Taste Newberg has already put all that visitor center or that visitor information out there on their website, we want to direct that back to them. So we are looking at linking up with the DMO and helping visitors connect with that information that's already been collected by them.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. The one other piece that caught my attention, you mentioned, having flyers and brochures and things that are like, hey, like, Bend is really cool over here, which is like really far. I still have Mid to Bend, but I hear it's really cool. Do we have at least some sort of agreement with whatever the equivalent of the chamber is out in Bend and these other places that we might be pushing folks to, that they are, sort of in a reciprocal, you know what I'm saying, reciprocity matters? Are they doing that as well?
It's a great question. So we have a contracted series of card racks and magazine slots where all this type of collateral or information is provided to us on a contract from a company based in Portland, and they travel around the state and they distribute this information that people have contracted them to do so. Unfortunately, as a Chamber of Commerce, we don't necessarily have a big shiny, Visit Newberg magazine. So we have our directory, but we've only shipped them out to a handful of like-minded chambers of commerce or visitor centers over the last couple of years.
Sure.
Well, and that would be, Bryce, to Visit Newberg would be, the entity that would do that work specifically of cross collaboration with different cities.
That makes sense. And I don't know if this is more of a question for Matt, but right now our TLT funds, I'm guessing those are split between the Commerce and Taste of Newberg. Is that correct? Or is there? I know you and I have we have a meeting that we need to get on the books to go over, but
yes, that's the case.
Okay, got you. And is 1875? 18,750 consistent, like on a yearly basis?
I believe that's based on a contract renewal that happened the conversation started about this time last year. And I think we are about set to start that conversation again with the city.
Councilor, this is Doug Rux. So I think I'll step in here. Is a couple of things for some clarification is that the chamber used to report visitors. Now with Taste Newberg in place, they actually, as part of their quarterly report, they are reporting web numbers on visitors. And as Josh had indicated, they have their website up. And if you haven't looked at it, you might want to go check that out. The other part is that we did a 1 year, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we did a 1 year contract with the chamber for the visitor center for fiscal year 2021. Typically, we start conversations at the end of October about a contract renewal for that. The Visit Newberg, i.e. Taste Newberg contract was for 3 years. They've completed their first year. They just did their annual report and they have 2 more years on their contract. And the last piece is the amount of dollars that are going to the chamber this year are less than they were last year because revenues overall were down, as we saw at the end of last fiscal year, and projected to be down this fiscal year over prior fiscal years. And so Matt has all of those numbers.
Right, for sure. It makes sense because CLT is based, right, it's percentage. So that makes sense. Thank you.
What is, Doug or Matt, what is the annual budget for the visitor center? Is it 95,000 as it is here in this, or because I'm not sure where 18,750 is coming from if the annual budget is 95,000.
The overall budget for this year is the 95,577, and they get paid on a monthly basis. So Matt breaks that out, and it's a set amount each month.
That's last year, Doug. Just as a matter of correction.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, 75,000 annually, and that's quarterly at 18,750.
Oh, that's core. Okay, right. Okay.
That's why you have the finance guy have the numbers. You don't ask me.
I don't usually do math after 7 o'clock, but you know, you got a bonus today.
I didn't have my budget book sitting in front of me.
All right. Any other questions, folks, for Josh?
I have one question, Rick. So hi, nice to meet you, Josh. I do have a question. So as we were talking,
75.
I know I'm just curious, is there like a proactive interest to reach out to the Latinx businesses, like proactively, not just like in the moment? I think especially as we're talking about, as you're mentioning, like you going out to the local businesses, talking to them, like I know some of them have staff, for example, that speak English, but not necessarily the owners themselves. And I think it's really important to build that relationship with them. So like either being more proactive about that. If it's still like a drop-in center, I know that a lot of the older generation of the Latinx community doesn't necessarily use Yelp. I feel like that's more millennials or, you know, the younger generations who are using that. So I think that would be a great opportunity for you all to reach out to the Latinx community. So I'm just curious, like, where's the board at? Where are you at? Because I feel like there's always a mention of trying to reach out to the Latinx businesses, but I want to know if it's actually proactive.
Great question. And it's kudos to our last CEO. She actually had plans to put in place to hire a Latinx staff member who would actually take care of those actions. Unfortunately, our budget didn't necessarily facilitate that position to be filled at this time. So is it, you know, there's good intentions and then there's active, seeking work. So we recently had someone stop in. He stopped in on behalf, he's like Equitable Advisors, and he stopped in just on behalf of his own, business. But he, I was kind of asked this question, well, are you bilingual? And he was young. I think he's all of 22, 23 years old, and he's a recent George Fox grad. And I asked him, and he's like, yeah, I do. And then I also spoke recently with Eric Sosa, who's the son of Ray Sosa from Ray's Produce. And it was just within this last week, there's these two, or last week, these two interactions that I had sort of said, well, if the chamber can't hire somebody, what we can do is we can make an inviting atmosphere for Latinx business managers or owners to pursue chamber membership, and we could form a subcommittee and allow them to do the work, within their community, and help back that and promote that work. If we don't have the ability to fill a position and do that specifically, we may be able to form a group that can do that for the city and for the chamber. So that is something that's on my plate, and I am bringing it to my executive committee on Friday.
All right, any other questions for Josh, anyone? All right, well, Josh, well, best of luck, right? And thank you for taking it on. And, if there's anything that we can do, just please reach out, and we're happy to help if we can.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving right on, Molly with the Downtown Coalition. Good evening.
Good evening. The first trick is unmuting, and then Sue is sharing a quick presentation. So Newberg Downtown Coalition, quick update, but with a hidden agenda. It's really a thank you card. So if you want to go to the next slide, Sue. I say it's interesting because, it's a polite meeting. Oops, nope, back one. Thank you. So we had lots of plans, actually, not unlike Josh and Shannon. And COVID had a reset button for all of us. So what we've done this year has been focused on creating safe outdoor community opportunities that will enhance the economics of people coming downtown. So the Wednesday market in partnership with CPRD, and the holiday market this last Saturday out at the Cultural Center, with thanks to the Chehalem Cultural Center. Sidewalk and parking lot seating with lots of patients from Karen and our planning department in general. And then we're exploring outside, how can we extend the outside space? Outside is the safest place for groups of people to meet. We live in the Northwest, so it's the wettest place for people to meet. So if we can find a way between CPRD, the city, the chamber, Newberg Downtown Coalition to fund some coverings for spaces so that people can continue to come together outside safely, that's a way of kind of extending the shoulder season. COVID and the wildfire response took up a lot of our time. Basically in partnership with the chamber, because Shannon did and Abisha did a lot of the interaction with the county and the state. And then our job was to take that and the city work and get it out to the downtown businesses. And then masks and shields distribution, getting them out to people rather than making people come to us, because when you're a small business trying to survive, that can, every little bit helps. Most fun was driving them around in the wine country. I had no idea how many gravel roads we are blessed with in Yamhill County. And I did wash the van before I took it home so that Stephen would not know. The downtown focus has really been in concert with the city urban renewal and West End zoning changes. Britta worked with Brian Francis and got a grant for the Cameo to update the seats. Any of you have gone to movies in there and sat in some of the old seats. This is truly a blessing for Newberg. I want to say in every talk that I give, there will be no Halloween trick or treat this year. Please spread the word. I myself am doing candy bags on the bottom step of the porch so that people can grab stuff and safely be on their way if families are going. But in general, the downtown businesses are not supporting trick or treat this year because it's not a, if you've ever been to trick or treat, it's 1,000 kids in a mass with adults going up and down the street. There's no way to do it safely. And then Q4, we're working on, we haven't done a downtown cleanup due to COVID. And so we're working on that and also working on seeing if we can light up downtown. We won't do a Christmas tree this year because that's another 1,000-person event. but we thought we might work on lighting up the edges of downtown businesses and seeing if we could leave the lights up all winter as a kind of a brightening up of downtown. And then we will do what Britta researched and found is an old tradition in Newberg, which is having trees at all the businesses and organizations that are willing to put them up where they can be seen through a window or outside, and then doing a map and list of where they are so people can go around and see them without creating large clusters of people. So that's kind of 2020. Sue, if you go to the next page. Thank you. I think the reason I wanted to come tonight, and I told Dan this, and he said, you don't have to say thank you, but honestly, none of this happens without community. And Newberg is a phenomenal community. And you guys, you hear about all the garbage. I thought you should hear about some of the good stuff, okay? So it's the city, it's George Fox, it's all the building owners, it's the business owners, it's all of our county partners, and I see multiple of them on the meeting tonight. It's CPRD, and then it's volunteers. So if you go to the next slide, this is my thank you for letting me come and tell you all the good stuff people are doing tonight. So first off, every week from May through September, most weeks we had between 600 and 900 people come to the Wednesday market. It's phenomenal for downtown businesses and for Newberg residents. It became a date night, people told me as they were coming in and getting sprayed with. Free alcohol is how we sell our hand sanitizer. It's Doug and Lori Peterson, it's Lonnie Parrish and Linda and Brian Mitchell, because without them, we would not have had the lots to put it on. GFU, Rob Felton and Jillian. I didn't talk much about the murals, but there's a public art committee that's in progress. And GFU is a big part of that. The mayor, the city manager, who's too shy to be thanked, so we won't thank him. But the council approving the art committee, Public Works, Russ took care of us in the market. He found us a bike rack. We had street closure signs. We had no parking signs. Doug and Russ and Karen walked the streets with me to see how we could put sidewalk seating out for restaurants and simplify the process and speed it up so that people could get the number of tables they could serve up, because people need to make money while the weather is good. This winter is not going to be easy. So I wanted to just say thank you. We have a phenomenal city staff. So there you can all blush, it's good. The volunteers, the Rotary and Kiwanis funneled people into the market. It takes about 20 volunteers a week to staff the market, set up, tear down, and 3 entrances with separated entrance and exits. So once COVID is gone, the market becomes vastly simpler, but right now it is not simple if we want to keep it safe. We had very patient family members, and including Rick and Lisa Rogers, for some reason, were often there for tear down, and others not on this bridge. CPRD, Don Clements was stubborn about moving it downtown unless we could handle at least 40 vendors. And we thought, we know he's not this way, but we thought maybe he was smoking something. But indeed, we ended up topping out at close to 50 vendors, and we needed that room. So, and he ran interference for us and helped us get the closure of First Street. Erin Harrington, if you don't know her, she works for CPRD, but she runs the Sherwood Market and has for 10 years. She's our market vendor manager. She's a big reason we were successful. If I go down to the partners, we have the Cultural Center, who helped us with the holiday market this last week. The Chamber and Taste Newberg, or is it Visit Newberg? Maybe Visit and then Taste Newberg. We've been meeting under Mark's leadership saying, how do we come together to get the work done without overlapping? Because it's very clear that Leslie's organization is really going to be focused on the marketing. We do not need to do that for for things that fit within her bailiwick, but the local stuff that doesn't really fit within her charter is something Josh and I can work on, and so on. So we're working our way through that, trying to figure out how to make that work. Yamhill County Emergency Services, Abisha can tell you they've been awesome in getting us masks, shields, sanitizer, whatever we needed, and really just orchestrating it beautifully. So make sure you tell them, Abisha, that they're muchly appreciated. And then TVF&R, when you go to close College Street, the two things you have to worry about are public safety and the fire engines who like to use that street to get onto 99 and take care of business. But they accommodated us and only rarely went by with sirens going off, which was very startling. But we were able to close the street. Lastly, it's only was possible because of all the businesses that came together, and they don't get thanked and they don't need to be thanked, but it's good to recognize that our business community really does care and contribute a lot. So Todd Saunders rolled the lots for us multiple times, watered it, rolled it so that it wasn't dusty. Reed Rentals, it gets dark in September before the market's closed. And we went to Reed Rentals and said, do you have any lights? And they gave us 2 of those inflatable fan lights, no charge. Every Wednesday night, come pick them up, bring them back Thursday, no charge. There were multiple businesses that signed on to have booths at the market, because when we first started the market, everybody was closed. And people like Tiffany at Coffee Cat signed on for the year. They said, we just want to support you. CVDA, the Dance Academy also. So I don't want to read them all to you, but you guys should know that the businesses on College let us close College Street, even though it was kind of a nuisance for them and their business not to have parking. And then many other businesses, as the market came on, stayed open till 7 or 8 at night so that there was actually a live business culture downtown for the market growers. So this is community. This is what it takes to make a market where you get 600 to 1,000 people coming. And I just wanted to, I get a lot of kudos, as does Britta and Aaron. Oh, you guys did a great market. No, we all did a great market. And I really wanted to make sure that was clear, because it can't happen without community. And then just the last page is just looking forward. If we go down, yep. I think we're not out of the COVID woods, probably maybe this time next year, if we're lucky, but I think it takes time for a vaccine to get out. It takes time for things to work through. So I think we have more of the same next year. And so we will plan on doing the holiday market, the Wednesday market. If we can figure out a covered space, we can expand those activities a little bit further into the weather not being so good. We'll continue to work. I think this winter is going to be tough with COVID response. And I think we have to just keep our eye on it and keep helping the businesses. And then we'll keep working with Doug and his team on urban renewal and zoning changes to grow the area that downtown can grow in. Administer the Cameo grant. And then I want to do a spring cleanup as well. We'll first try and pull off this cleanup. I got a lot of instruction from Russ on how to power wash the sidewalks without drowning the businesses. So we'll see how we do. And then public art and sculptures and murals with GFU is on our roadmap. It's been a little delayed by COVID, but we'll be moving forward with that as well. So that's all of it in a nutshell. Any questions? Dan, did I cover what you wanted?
I just want to say too, Molly, I mean, you're doing all of this basically as a volunteer. So I know that it's like totally you to be humble and lift up everyone else. But I mean, honestly, it gives me chills thinking about all that you guys did. And just personally, when the market opened, I mean, that was like my first like ray of hope during COVID of getting to do that after work. So I just really want to thank you from my family. And then Stephanie and I actually went to the holiday market this last weekend and it was amazing. And we spent way too much money. So
good.
Thank you for doing that. I know I speak for Stephanie and myself, but I'm super grateful for both you and Britta. So And I love the art too. So you have all the fun stuff.
All right. Any other comments or questions for Molly, folks? All right.
A quick question.
Bryce.
Yeah, Molly, I echo Lisa's statements. Great job. Love the market. Good work. Would love to meet you in person. I've heard good things about you as well. So few questions. One, in terms of like tracking usage and participation, do we have data around usage? Again, I know COVID tends to just mess everything up. But coming in, somewhat new would be helpful to get data around usage.
So when you say usage with respect to the markets, what we have is clickers at each entryway. Mm-hmm. So we know and tracked every half hour. And part of this was to ensure we didn't get too many people in the market to allow social distancing.
That's right.
So yes, we have actually data from every half hour for every market. And partly we did that to try and see if we could figure out how to load level the market. Initially, everybody came at 4. It was a bit of a nightmare. So we added more entrances and exits and started doing specials starting at 6 to kind of flatten out the curve. So we have that kind of data. We don't, we're luckier than the chamber in that our people are basically the downtown area, and then it will extend down to the urban renewal area. So I can walk my beat, as it were, and hand out masks. I can hand out membership letters, stick my head in, see how people are doing, because it's very concentrated. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have visitors to the office. In fact, we sort of closed the office because of COVID, but we just go out to the people. Is basically what we do.
Yeah, no, I love that. And a few things I've read about farmers markets. I don't think this is the case here in Newberg. I lived in Malibu because I worked at Pepperdine for a while. And one of the things you notice is that the farmers markets there weren't particularly accessible. Granted, it's like in Malibu, right? But weren't particularly accessible to certain communities of color or lower socioeconomic folks because of timing. And so that would be, my question is, how do we see the communities of color in Newberg and lower socioeconomic folks engaging in the market? And I'm thinking specifically around food and the opportunities there are to provide like good, fresh, healthy food to communities. And what potential barriers would be, right? Like I've seen places where food is actually more expensive in farmers markets, even though again, they're hopefully grow locally and all these other sorts of things. And so that would be my next question is, in terms of who's engaging, how are we being conscious of communities that really could benefit from access to fresh food and produce and things like that?
So I think one thing that we didn't do this year because we simply didn't have time and didn't know how is to, and now I won't get the letters right, but it's food stamps. It's the ability to, I can't remember what it's, yes, but there's a way of setting it up so that you can accept them. I think I got that request twice out of all markets. So it wasn't a huge request, but that's part of, if you build it, they will come. If people know that that's accessible, then
absolutely
they won't, right? So that was a goal for next year. The other was, we had a mix of many different people, Hispanic, we're a really white town here. I don't know if you've noticed.
No.
So mostly it's not people of color, but we had a good mix. And part of that was because of the vendors. So some of the vendors, sorry, I'm just late night, but Dos Mundos, they're actually down on 99. Their food is awesome. Every time they were there, people came for them, right? So part of that was, and then we had 3 major fresh food suppliers One of was Yarnell Farms. He did not speak a lot of English. He was Hispanic. Beautiful produce, and people came for them, right? So I don't know how we would, I often thought about that because I live right near where the Old Fashioned Festival is. And there's actually, the Old Fashioned Festival is quite segregated in my experience. There's the Hispanic layer that goes down College where there are vendors and stuff. And then there's the Hispanic music. And then over in Memorial Park, there's the other bands. This is just me as someone new to Newberg.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you know, you have all those vendors there, but they're not at our market, right? So maybe in time we can grow. I mean, if you want people to come, you want to supply things that they would want. So it's something we can look at, right?
Yeah, no, I love all of those ideas. And for those listening or watching, Matt, appreciate your comment around, you know, some things Beaverton are doing. I've seen other communities as well that provide access, you know, through different food stamp programs, which I think we totally could do. And I think would also increase usage in the night market. That's already clearly wildly successful, might create more problems around capacity, but no, well, we can
figure it out.
I'm sure.
We'll figure it out. Every time it got bigger, we figured it out.
Hey, good problems to have.
Yep.
Okay, any more questions for Molly? All right, Molly, thank you so much. Thank you for all
Pleasure,
you've
you
done.
guys.
Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, we're going to try here. We're going to try. All right. All right, Dan, if you don't mind, if we could move the city manager's report. We've got some folks for public comment. I know Matt has been on the line for quite a while now, and so maybe we jump to that. So folks listening, these are for general public comments for items that are not specifically on the agenda. We offer 5 minutes for people to make their comment. And I know in the case of Matt's comment, he forwarded an email, and I think Truman Stone, the city attorney, actually provided us additional information. So Mr. Ross, it's the stage is yours.
So I have a statement put down to make sure I covered everything. So give me a moment while I read that. I will be for questions afterwards. Mayors and members of the City Council, I'm joining you tonight to talk about the issue of construction noise outside of, sorry, it flipped off my document. As our community, construction noise outside of permitted hours. As our community has transitioned from growing in size and switched to an infill model in established neighborhoods, the impact of construction noise on residents has grown exponentially. This has never been more evident for me than to live across from the former C.S. Lewis Academy property on Winooski Street. For the past 3 years, my family has dealt with near constant construction noise and vibration, which has shaken our home from many different phases of construction at this site. From emergency repairs to the area's sewer system, to the demolition and remodel of the Harding building, to the construction of 16 homes. Over the past 3 years, I have attempted to work with city code enforcement, the construction companies, and even local law enforcement to find some relief from the noise. This has been a 3-year process where I have sought clarity from multiple sources to seek out the true definition of City Code 8-15-150J, which states, under the unreasonable noise, construction, repair of buildings or excavation of streets and highways, the construction, demolition, alteration, or repair of any building or excavation of streets and highways other than the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays, which in essence means construction is limited to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. weekdays. Throughout the construction on this property, spanning several different construction phases, multiple construction companies, there has been one constant. That is the complete disregard for city code and the immediate residents. Construction activities have frequently and consistently occurred outside the established hours set forth in 8-15-150J. From the 5:45 a.m. offloading of heavy equipment to the 10:45 p.m. construction or heavy equipment service rigs working on equipment, to early morning or early Sunday morning power saws and air nailers. Construction has even run in many instances 7 days a week. There has been no break as intended by 815-150J. Starting April 3rd of this year, I began an email thread with Brian Korn of the Code Compliance Officer for the City of Newberg. In it, I sought clarification for 815-150J and was given a direct response that the correct interpretation of this code is implied to be no construction on weekends or outside of construction hours unless specifically permitted. Since that first email, I've used that thread to document instances where pervasive construction noise has disturbed our community. My understanding from Brian is that city code and the associated fines for breaking those codes are not an effective deterrent to companies to ensure compliance. My request to the council is to revisit this code, clarify it to specifically state that construction is not permitted on Saturday and Sunday, and then establish rules for construction companies who violate those rules. My suggestion to the council is to look towards the city's rules for short-term vacation rentals in 15-445-350 as a structure for the rule change. Something for that proposal would look as if this: if the city receives 2 or more written noise complaints within a 1-year period regarding a construction company, and issues have not been resolved through code enforcement, the code enforcement officer, the city manager will schedule a hearing to consider revoking the construction company's permit or license. The hearing may be conducted by the city manager or other such hearings officer as the city manager may appoint. The city manager shall notify the owner and operator of the hearing, those submitting written complaints, and invite others to testimony at the hearing. After hearing the facts, the city manager may do any of the following, and you can look at the consequences that are under the short-term rentals. This is one of the only solutions that I can think of as a family to seek some relief. It has been difficult to live across from this situation. Going to bed late on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday night and knowing at 7 a.m. the construction is going to start, even though it's prohibited by city code. So I request that the city council look at those rules, look at city code, and do something to give us relief as infill construction continues.
All right, Mr. Ross, thank you. Thank you very much. As I mentioned at the onset, Mr. Stone did present us with the section of the code that you're referring to. Normally at this point, what we will do is we have an option as the council, we have an option as the council to direct staff as to what we would like to see done. So at this point, I think what we'll do is probably bring it up. I would imagine, Dan, at a later time for discussion, and then we can go from there if that's what the council's pleasure is. Can you guys just give me an idea if that's something you'd like to explore? Give me a hand wave if you think you'd like to do it. Okay, I got a couple waves, 3 waves, 4 waves. Looks like I got all the waves. So Mr. Ross, that's what we'll do. We'll take it up under advisement and go from there to see if we can get some clarification to the code. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. All right. Next, I think waiting to speak is Ms. Valerie Gray, please.
Thank you. My name is Valerie Gray and I live in North Newberg. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the issue of fire prevention. As you know, over Labor Day weekend, a high wind warning was in effect for the Willamette Valley. Despite this warning, my neighbor lit up a fire pit that violates the Yamhill County Fire Code. And the code requires recreational fire pits be located at least 25 feet from a structure or combustible materials, which includes trees, and be attended at all times. This non-compliant fire pit is located next to 2 wooden fences equidistant from both by about 8 feet, not 25. The fence alongside my house adjacent to my neighbor's yard sits 5 feet from my fence, and a second fence adjoins another neighbor's yard. The pit is also under a grove of trees in my yard where mulch covers the ground beneath them. And I have seen trees and bark mulch catch fire before when I lived in Portland. Last year, sparks from this pit flew up into my trees. In 2019, Codes and Compliance Officer Brian Korn responded to my complaint about the fire pit by speaking to the neighbor about the problem. And I accompanied him on one of 2 visits. He determined the pit was a violation, but issued no citation because he said it is Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue's responsibility to enforce the fire code. The woman at the residence told us her landscaper assured her the pit was compliant. When we suggested moving it, she said they would not light it again. But on Saturday, September 5th, after dark, my house started filling with smoke, and I looked down from my upstairs window to see the fire fully aflame. From above, it looks like a huge, intensely burning furnace. Having been told it's the fire marshal's duty to enforce the code, but hearing from Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue that it's the city's responsibility, I called Newberg Police. They arrived several hours later to inform me that since Coroner's enforcement officer, they could do nothing but talk to the neighbor. On Sunday, the following night, while the Chehalem mountain fire was getting started, I smelled smoke again and peered through the fence in my backyard to see a male adult sitting with his back to the fire, checking his phone. As you know, recreational fires emit thick smoke, which is also a health hazard. In this instance, the smoke rises directly into my upstairs window and the trees funnel the smoke down between the fence, so it enters the downstairs windows as well. And this would not be a problem if the fire pit was code compliant and in the middle of the neighbor's yard. In densely populated neighborhoods, we rely on neighbors to exercise common sense, but in how many situations do all families exercise good judgment consistently? Newberg police know from all the calls they receive on July 4th that human beings tend to be careless with fire, and the carelessness of individuals can destroy entire cities, as residents in Southern Oregon recently discovered. An enacted law has no teeth if it's not enforced. The city needs to enforce the fire code. A fire pit is of imminent concern when it's located in a high density neighborhood in the middle of 12 properties, none of which have an HOA. And ironically, of all the homes in this block, the family with the fire pit has the largest yard with the capacity to place it safely in the middle, but does not. And my closest neighbor and I are both disabled and can't move quickly, so we depend on the long shared driveway to exit our properties. Furthermore, a dry brush from a large tree at the corner of College and Columbia could make evacuation hazardous were that tree to catch fire. Notice the burn bans need to be consistently disseminated throughout the city, because it's important to note that the residents with this fire pit lit it after the police notified them of my complaint and of the high wind warning. And for that reason, I and other neighbors remain gravely concerned that the city of Newberg declines to enforce regulations on recreational fires. Fire marshals I've spoken to insist it's the city's responsibility to enforce codes. Fire Marshal Steve Forrester cited privacy issues surrounding enforcement. He said this was a deterrent from officials entering private property to determine whether or not a pit was compliant. And yet the yards in my block are not private. From a second-story window, the activities within them are as visible as activities in public parks. And adjoining backyards become a publicly shared space, so they should be subject to reasonable regulations. The logic about enforcement escapes me because we have noise ordinances, yet to my knowledge, excessive noise never killed anyone. Yet fires kill citizens and raze thousands of acres and destroy hundreds of properties every year. City Attorney Truman Stone advised me to contact fire marshals again after the mayor kindly visited my home. I did. I contacted Yamhill County. They said they have no jurisdiction. DEQ notified my neighbor there had been a complaint, but they do not enforce the fire code. And after the tragic wildfires this year, I'd like to ensure another one does not occur in North Newberg. Since the housing boom began in Newberg, houses like mine are now surrounded by subdivisions, and neighbors need to be educated about fire codes. We can't hope that people will check to see if there's a burn ban when friends come over and beg them to roast marshmallows for s'mores. So I'd like to know what the city's plans are for addressing this very serious problem in preparation for next year's fire season. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Gray. I think, again, folks, why don't we go with a show of hands if we would like to see this looked into further. I think, again, as was mentioned, and Truman has mentioned this before as well, that there is a jurisdictional question as to who, remember, we contract with our fire service through TVF&R. So we have a fire district. So would y'all like to look into this further? Give me
Mayor,
yes,
Mayor,
Denise, please.
I also, if this seems twice now in this past year that the fire marshal and the code, because we had in my neighborhood, the very tall weeds, and that, so maybe some codes that mention the fire marshal should be looked at on a whole, because if we should all be on the same page, right? If they're not going to do it, we have to do it. Or if they're doing it, we don't want to do it. But with the tall weeds, that mentions the fire marshal. The fire pit also mentions the fire marshal. So maybe we should look at all of it at the same time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, I think again, that might have, it's because of the change to district. I don't think we caught up with all the code, but we do need to figure out who's responsible for this kind of stuff. So anybody else?
Real quick question for clarification. Maybe this more so for Truman, because I know he was explicitly mentioned in the public comments. There has been a level of response to this, correct? Like I saw in looked like a comment. There had been a couple responses from the city. So for those listening, watching, and myself included, it'd be helpful to hear what has that been already, because it appears as though we have been somewhat responsive. So it'd be good to get some clarification on that before trying to figure out then what the next best step would be.
Okay, well, why don't we get that as a part of the
Sure.
review? Maybe that's better, but you're right to say, Bryce, yes, there has been, as my understanding is, there's been a number of communications. As Ms. Gray mentioned, I visited as well, and I know Brian has, et cetera. So let's get a history of that, and then also see what we can do then about determining really, who it is that's responsible for this. As Denise mentioned, fire marshal may be an outdated concept in our current structure. So, okay. All right. Is that okay, everybody? Good with that? Okay. Looks like we're good with that. Okay. Ms. Gray, thank you. And we will get back to you once we have a better understanding of the various responsibilities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
Very
right.
appreciate it.
Okay. All right. City managers report, Dan, please.
Okay. We'll get this report posted later this week, and looking at the clock, I'll try to be brief, but wanted to highlight something I mentioned in the last report, which is that the state's Occupational Safety and Health Administration has issued COVID-related guidelines that impact not just us, but basically every workplace in the state, both the distancing requirements that have been in place and also masking or face covering requirements. So those rules go in force November 1st, and we've already put steps in place to change workspaces to increase distancing and make sure that all of our staff have and wear masks. That includes staff, actually patrons, contractors, pretty much anyone who comes on our one of our sites. There are ways to seek an accommodation, but generally speaking, that rule will go into effect November 1st, and we're doing what we can to get ahead of it. Related to that, also been working on COVID-related projects. You'll hear about one very shortly, and then also trying to work on additional projects related to our CARES Act funding, kind of getting those finalized as well. So nearing the end of the CARES Act window, which will be the end of December. So very much trying to make best use of the funding that was provided to the city for community benefit. Also wanted to highlight the ongoing work around economic development strategies. That's something that has been updated, that Ned's document is being updated with the committee in order to reflect COVID realities and the impacts we've had there. Other work that I've been working on is related to the Public Works Department. On 9th of October, we did have interviews for the director position. As you're well aware, I think that position is one of the several vacancies in department head level that I walked into. And so I was able to come to agreement today with Russ Thomas, who's been our interim and who's been a longtime Newberg employee and has a great deal of operational experience. Really excited to have him, to keep him, and take advantage of that. He's very practical in his thinking and a real team player. One of the things that really struck me in the interview process, and I'm sure is familiar to all of you who've interacted with him, is the mentality of doing more than expected. And, you know, I just think about the customer service and some of the other goals we have as a community, and really think that he'll provide a lot of value to our team as an ongoing member of the executive team, I guess, in the department head group. Quickly moving over to the library, the front porch of the community, as I'm reminded every time we do this. We've actually had in September fewer visits. We think that was likely reflecting the smoke and sort of the fire behavior of the early part of September. Had about 1,500 fewer visits than we'd had the last 2 months prior. I will note, though, that circulation actually held steady and slightly increased in September. And so I think what you probably saw was exactly what I described, that people were staying at home and probably also hopefully observing some of the physical distancing that the library has been trying to encourage people to observe, send one family member instead of everyone going, and everybody's still reading and participating in library programming. I will note as well, actually, one of the accommodations the library has put into place related to COVID, which has been popular, I understand, is the curbside service. So during all hours of operation, the library is providing curbside, essentially delivery of your items from the library to your car, so that folks who did not want to or could not wear masks into the library would still be able to take advantage of the service. And so, you know, an ongoing effort to really encourage use of that amenity. So community engagement, really quickly, have been working on a community plan or communications plan and strategy, something that we're doing externally and internally. And so meetings have occurred over the last week or so with department heads, essentially an assessment of all their thoughts on needs related to communication with the consultant we've selected, and Lacey performing those interviews. And then a survey should be out shortly, I believe in the next week or so, that will be sent out to community members, both sort of institutional agency members, as well as, I think, individuals, and seeking input on city communications so that we can better assess how we're doing, where we could provide more information, and how to provide some of that. We're also going to survey our staff to think about internal communication and how we might improve that as well. The expectation of the ongoing effort around communication strategy is that we will have them present, the Lacey and our consultants present on December 7th to the council. So you all will get a taste of that, you know, the preliminary report at least December 7th, and then hopefully in January we'll finalize that report and have some action items that we'll put into place. Want to highlight, I guess, the Know Your Local Government, which is part of our elections and overall information about the community and or about the city to the community. That publication was reviewed and enhanced with the latest and greatest. That's something that Sue had put together in 2018, and we had an effort to update that, like people like me who are new, add information about us and what's going on and how some of the structure has changed. And so that is available on the city's website. And again, this information will be published on our site as well, and there'll be a link there if you want to go that way to find it. You can also type in the search bar, Know Your Local Government, and I think you'll be able to find that document and all the resources. Just want to remind folks that we have an election going on, and you know, without electioneering, just say vote. And you got a little bit of time to do that, and you don't have to do postage this year. So there are drop boxes in Newberg at Jaquith Park, the Public Safety Building, and PCC campus. So you know, we'd like to see your vote. Moving on to Public Works, my latest shameless plug for C-Click Fix. Again, that's available in your app store, whatever device you use. It enables every resident who has a smartphone to report community issues, potholes, streetlights, graffiti, all kinds of other hazards and things like that. We've had about 17 reports since that was launched on September 23rd. I encourage people to download that app and to take pictures, send in information. The more we know, the more we can get on and fix those items. Related to fixing things, the sidewalk program is launched, and there are $50,000 available in both grant and loan programs for residents to repair or replace the sidewalks adjacent to their property. It's a first come, first served allocation of money, and all materials have been provided in Spanish as well. So looking forward to giving away some money there. Also wanted to highlight something that I think had come up previously, which was that we had some trees on the Springbrook Road project that had died, and those have been replaced. Those were Tupelo trees, and so I had to wait for those to grow, I guess, and to be ready to install. So 42 trees were installed there, and hopefully, knock on wood, tree, maybe pun intended, we will have those last a little longer than they did before. Also related to our CARES Act projects, something that I think will be an immediate but hopefully a long-term change. Our facilities group is working with the folks over at PD on a Zoom room. That's something we're hoping that will be a change that can be sustained, which is that the police can do participation in court appearances from the convenience, I guess, of the PSB, the Public Safety Building, rather, via Zoom, rather than necessarily spending a whole day in court. So that's a COVID immediate issue and funded through CARES, but I think hopefully will be a long-term change. Community development, I think probably everyone's heard that the mill site was sold, and I think we're all super excited about that. I see people celebrating on my screen, which is great. And that, of course, means the next step, which I think Riverfront Plan has already been talked about a lot. I know Doug's working hard on that, working hard in meeting with the new owners on their development plans, and those are coming forth shortly, I think. And then, really trying to make sure that we're doing the plan review and changes necessary to facilitate the implementation of that Riverfront Plan. There's an opportunity for input, so I want to highlight that as well, related to the economic opportunities analysis. A virtual open house is being prepared for the 19th to the 30th, where public can submit comments electronically. Want to encourage people to do that, and I think we'll probably have that put out through our social media and other on the website and highlighted as an opportunity to give us feedback. In PD, just wanted to mention also briefly the community response team, which is a relatively new group of officers that are focused on mitigating ongoing neighborhood problems, community problems. So problems, for instance, a house, something that has a lot of complaints, questions and complaints, trying to work from a law enforcement angle to really understand what's happening there and fix the problem. One of the things that happened in the last week, which is noteworthy, was that CRT team was able to stop a suspect and confiscate over a pound of meth. And the person also had a good amount of heroin and other drugs and some cash. And so excited to be able to take that off the streets. Kudos to the team for doing that. And that case will be prosecuted apparently federally. So, something that hopefully will have a positive benefit locally and regionally, and hopefully a lot of crimes that were averted by taking those drugs off the streets. And the last thing is, you may, if you see police officers this month, you may see them wearing a pink undershirt and ribbons for the month of October is supporting breast cancer awareness. And so just wanted to highlight that fact, and something I give Chief Kosmicki a little bit of a hard time about when I first saw it, and then he corrected me as to why. So wanted to share that information. And I think that's where I'll leave it. And unless there are other questions, the one actually save round that I have is that we are working now on our 2021 planning calendar. So we'll work with council as well, but all department heads are starting to submit those items, and excited to start planning next year as well. Hopefully it'll be a less COVID-y, better year overall for all of us.
Let's hope so. So first off, Russ, I think you're probably on the line, and if you are, congratulations. That's fantastic. So very good. Any other questions for Dan?
One real quick question, Dan.
Sure.
You said it's around voting. You said postage is not required, and I heard ... this year. Maybe I haven't been paying close attention, like in being somewhat new to Oregon. Is it not common practice for postage to have already been paid for?
So I think you were asking the guy who has been here less than time than you, but
I think 2 years. 2 years.
Years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it used to be a stamp, was required to vote.
I see. But now, and the plan is moving forward. Is that something that's already been paid for?
Right.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Coming from a California, that's it's already prepaid.
Or you can drop it in the box, which then
Right.
the taxpayers don't have to pay the bill. So that's
There you
cheaper.
go. Yeah. And it's been submitted, right? So
And it's submitted for sure. It's official.
Verification.
You can track it too if you want. You can find out where it is.
It's wonderful.
And
Like, for those listening or watching later, do we know like specifically locations or where folks can look up where the locations are specifically? And I ask because I've seen in California, there were like discrepancies around Dropbox locations that weren't actually approved by the city and state. So where can folks know specifically where to drop it off?
Well, those 3 locations that I mentioned in town are verified official locations. I'm guessing Sue can correct me. There have to be more if you were traveling, McMinnville or somewhere else. But you do need to drop them off in your county. And so go for it, Sue. You look like you got something to.
There's a list online at the Yamhill County Elections website. So you just look up Yamhill County Elections and they have an entire page that lists all the drop box in Yamhill County.
And I think they would be the place to track your ballot. Is that correct?
You can go to OregonVotes.org, which is the website of the Secretary of State, and you can track your ballot there. They also have the links on the Yamhill County Elections site, so it will show you when it gets scanned, when it's picked up, when the boxes are emptied, and when it arrives and it goes through the process.
Okay.
Since we're talking about voting, Oregon is by far the easiest place to vote in the country. It is well known that it is. And we've been doing this mail thing for a heck of a long time, since 1998, I believe. Although the first local election was actually done all the way back in 1982. So there it is. There's no reason 3 voting places in Newberg, or put it in the mail.
For
So
sure.
there we go.
And to be clear, because I know I can be lazy sometimes and not always want to look it up. It's at Jaquith Park, right, Newberg, Public Safety Building, and the PCC Center are the 3 in Newberg. Jaquith Park,
yes,
Public Safety Building, and PCC Center. You can go.
That's them.
And something that people don't always know is that the sooner you get in your ballot, every day the Secretary of State's office updates the voter rolls during the week. And so the sooner you get your ballot in, the sooner you stop getting the text, phone calls, and literature drops on your doorstep. So if you vote early, you stop getting your phone calls.
Incentive right there.
Okay. Anything else for our fearless city manager? All right. All right, let's move it along. Now, as we said during the work session, we're going to adjust the agenda a bit. So now we're moving on to item 8A under new business, the RCA for the CARES Act funding project, Oasis. And I think we've got Abisha Stone from SEDCOR and Shannon Buckmaster from the city. And I don't know who else, but the floor is yours, folks.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We're really thrilled to finally be presenting Project Oasis to City Councilor and to our mayor. I want to recognize Matt Zook, who is helping us navigate the financial language on behalf of the City of Newberg for this ask. And of course, Abisha Stone of SEDCOR, many of you know her. She is our contracted economic development specialist for Yamhill County through SEDCOR, the Strategic Economic Development Corporation out of Salem, but also the contracted partner by the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. So you have a great team of resources to answer any of your questions tonight. Following along with some of the literature that was sent with a little bit of supplementary information. I just looked at the clock because I also want to be timely with this message. With an understanding that City of Newberg funding for this project would be a reimbursable expense through CARES Act funds. Our Project Oasis partners, led by DCI, a local mid-sized manufacturing company with a strong international performance standard, and the Spencer Family Foundation Trust, connected then by the Spencer and Murphy two-generation families of local business owners. We have John and Janelle Spencer and Tim and Laura Murphy. Humbly request $115,785 from the City of Newberg to support the development of Project Oasis. Project Oasis is one of those fantastic private-public partnerships that comes together really once in a lifetime. We've been waiting for this perfect opportunity where all of our resources are aligned, our opportunities are present. We have partners who are willing to step up and really invest from the beginning of the conversation in something that is deeply impactful and deeply meaningful for a community. I want to give credit to Tim Murphy, who approached Abisha and I just a few weeks ago, less than 2 months ago, saying, hey, we have a workforce development issue. Because of childcare needs, we're struggling to retain and attract the workforce that we need in order to continue building, investing in our strong local and global economies through our production at DCI. And it started with that quick comment, escalated into what is looking like a multi-generational legacy project centered here in Newberg. How we started to identify even just the project name Oasis, we know that the state of Oregon has a childcare desert in 36 counties, which means that fewer than 1 out of 3 children who need a spot in a childcare facility actually have access to that. We're very fortunate as we're pulling together this particular project. The Yamhill County Board of Commissioners recently funded, and we finished a Yamhill County Child Care Needs Assessment through the Early Learning Hub and Yamhill County Public Health. We just got those results late last week. And so we can even take our statewide statistics, bring it local, and see what this means for Newberg. 36% of parents surveyed in Yamhill County said that childcare was unaffordable. The barriers to childcare were limited affordable care, the lack of program slots, and we know that this problem was only made worse by COVID-19. In fact, the top 3 COVID barriers are safety, right? Thinking about cleanliness and social distancing, the cost prohibitive nature of rising tuition as childcare providers are both decreasing and having to raise their rates to keep up with their additional costs, and then distance learning support. I can also add that approximately 60% of licensed childcare facilities have closed since March statewide, and there's serious concern that the majority of them will not reopen without significant assistance. So here we are, we have a desert. Why not create Project Oasis here in Newberg? So Project Oasis seeks to provide affordable, safe, localized, dynamic, community-centered childcare, cohort-style distance learning, and early family programming for wage-earning working families and underserved persons in Yamhill County. We are starting the conversations early on about equitable access to our program, especially for those underrepresented communities in our area. We strive also to create a replicable, duplicatable model that could be used by rural communities around the state. All you need is one willing private partner to start the conversation, and that snowballs with the public wraparound services that we can provide. So DCI, in conjunction with the Spencer Family Foundation and Project Bloom, aim to develop a child care and community access facility, which at its core will provide affordable child care options for working parents, primarily in the Newberg, Dundee, and McMinnville area who struggle to find safe, legal, geographically convenient options. I do want to also say that we are looking at cohort-style distance learning as a long-term temporary component of this childcare solution. What that means, we don't know what education will look like through the end of the school year or through next school year, but we know it's a significant workforce development and community need right now, having support for distance learning. So even as this project is developing, the spaces that are being built to accommodate these children are flexible, so they can be transitioned to the future as an efficient, stewardship-minded use of any funds that are applied to the project. This project is gaining steam with significant partners. Our committed partners so far include, of course, DCI, the Spencer Family Foundation, Little Bird Childcare, the Strategic Economic Development Corporation, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, additionally the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, who have also already budgeted $400,000 of their CARES Act reimbursable funds toward this project. So we're actually following a strong model from our county under the same legal and fiscal process. We also have the City of Newberg as a municipal partner, the Newberg School District, the Early Learning Hub, Brick Architecture, and that list is growing, possibly including medical providers and relief nursery support. Growing out of this center, we're looking at a two-stage development, an immediate need with childcare and distance learning, and then, as I said, growing into a long-term facility option. So Abisha has been a strong partner. She's really helped craft a lot of the narrative around this project. Abisha is also managing a lot of the additional fundraising. This is not the only ask that Project Oasis is making of public partners. Project Oasis will also be pursuing community development block grants, possibly EDA funding as well. So we're looking at not just our city, our county, our state, but our federal funding options as well. This is a chance for Newberg to show that we really do support the community development that our community members say that they desperately need. Abisha or Matt, are there other comments that you would like to make to our city council or other city staff members?
Hi there, I'm Stone. I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Matt. First of all, I want to thank Mayor Rogers and the council for allowing us to come and present this really awesome project. And I want to thank staff for all the work that you have done on this project, but also just the work that you do to keep the city running. So thank you. I really love giving presentations following Shannon because she covers pretty much everything and I get to just add a few little points or say my hellos, but I do want to express that this is a project that SEDCOR supports. There's obviously a large need for childcare. Distance learning looks like a lot of different things right now, but having a distance learning program under childcare provides an opportunity for before school and after school care and actually satisfies a lot of the requirements that some of these pop-up distance learning facilities aren't able to manage. For example, they're limited to 4 hours a day for their distance learning cohorts, and parents, though that 4 hours is certainly helpful for a parent that might have to leave the home to go to work, it's not going to solve the problem that they have in taking care of their 11-year-old child who would otherwise be left home doing that work on their own and maybe shouldn't be. So I do want to express that this is the type of project where you bring in an industry partner. That is the type of project that creates foundations in communities, right? So to have a public-private partnership like this takes us back, and Mayor Rogers loves it when I give this analogy, but there was once a time with mill cities where essentially the mill owner created a city around his business, right? And said, let me create a space where people can come in and they can grow their families. Let's create a community that is livable and interactive and learns from each other and cares for each other. And that's how mill communities essentially grew, right? It's kind of the foundation of a community-centered approach, is saying, what do our workers need? What does the community need to look like to bring in the best workers? And this is an approach that businesses still take, but it's much more fragmented. And to be partnering with the city and partners like Brick Architecture and the school district is a phenomenal feat that many communities are not able to attract. So there are a lot of conversations around childcare right now. Shannon and I actually have a call with Congresswoman Bonamici tomorrow to talk about this specific project. So the city of Newberg is garnering a lot of attention around this project, not just because it's great and it's cool, but because it is so needed. It is so vital to recovery for COVID, but also long-term impact. And what I've been saying a lot lately, people will probably get tired of hearing me say it, is let's find opportunities to use short-term funding for long-term impacts. As you know, the CARES Act funding, your reimbursement opportunity currently sunsets at the end of December. So finding opportunities to invest in either things that are needed by the city, right, to address coronavirus, or projects such as this, these are sorts of approaches that SEDCOR wholeheartedly supports. So short-term funding for long-term solutions. Anyway, as I said, Shannon covered the majority of the rest of that, and I am just here to answer questions if there's any specific questions about the project. So thank you.
And Matt, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, my apologies. All right, we defer to any questions from the council.
I have a question.
Fire away, Stephanie.
So as someone who sits on the board for Head Start of Yamhill County, are there any thoughts around partnering with or sort of using this to help promote those birth to kindergarten programs for families who are struggling? I know that with COVID, we're probably going to see a lot more families that fall into that range that would be able to get services through places like Head Start. And one of the things that we know is that we've had a huge uptick in the families that are using the Birth to 3 program, and the outcomes for those kids then when they get into the in-school 3-year-old to kindergarten phase is so much more successful. So is there some way to either, I'm wondering if you're thinking about partnering with Head Start or being able to do some promotion of those families that maybe don't get into your program or actually are eligible for services through Head Start? Because I know a lot of families Google childcare and find out how much it costs, and that's the end of how they look for that. When there are programs out there that are available, but you know, they're not hugely funded and could have some impact for families. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there are some ways to partner with places like that in order to sort of get the most bang for your buck in terms of if it's not a family that fits well within your program or is can access your program, for ways to sort of steer them to places where they could access that.
That's a great question, Stephanie. And first of all, I do want to commend the generosity and the vision of the Murphy and Spencer families. While we were building out this larger concept, it was very quickly established that 40% of the available roughly 40% of the available childcare spots would be reserved for workforce. And then the additional 60% would become accessible to the public, including with vouchers or sliding scale fees or whatever is working well for this market model, so that the center is sustainable, but also is giving new access to communities of families who are struggling to find those services. We have also been in a very open process of identifying potential partners very early on, including Jen Richter at the Early Learning Center, and also conversations with Head Start. It's one of the reasons why the school district has very, very early on in this project become a solidly established partner, because we're looking at 0 through 3 and then pre-K preparation for kindergarten success. Also keeping in mind that, you know, our families are struggling, mental health challenges are increasing, all of those things that are a challenge under the best circumstances as a community, it's all being elevated with with the impacts of COVID-19. So we are studying those, and even the architectural firm Brick Architecture has a specialty in early learning spaces. And has really done some great projects, including the Gladstone Center for Children and Families, which this project is being loosely modeled on or perhaps inspired by. And in that process, we're looking at what those class sizes are, what the ratios are, of course, keeping in appropriate social distancing measurements. But even as we prioritize, how do we get the 0 through 3 in and still provide them spots so that they can age through the program instead of advancing to a different age group and not having spots left for those children to continue on. So we're looking also at developing, community resiliency, but also longevity with the particular students within the capacity that we have. And again, it's so cool that we're looking at a 40-60 split as the goal for this so that the community can be involved.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Stephanie. I appreciate the part of your question too, where you're talking about that cross referral component. So the identified childcare service provider in this project has a commitment to connecting people to the resources that they often don't know exist. And so a part of the programming that she's building internally is helping people identify those resources. And I'm not going to remember the acronym, but there is a state pay program for childcare that she is consistently educating parents about. So she has already established a process internally of kind of vetting applicants for her current childcare programming and then helping them identify some of those additional programs. So like Head Start, like the and also food assistance and things like that. So that will be embedded as part of the community support component.
I have a few questions as well. Super excited for this, by the way. Thank you all for your good work. First question is for Matt. In terms of CARES Act money, do you know roughly where we're at? Like where would this leave us if we were to support it?
Well, as Dan reported earlier in his city manager report, we have included this in our CARES funding allocation. We received about $706,000 from the state after the first initial grant of 152. So, this would be included, and we've got a plethora of other ways that we have spent or allocated that money. And so we're about at the end of allocating out the CARES funding for the purposes that we've utilized. You've heard some about with IT, with some facilities requests. Some of it's gone towards, labor. So yeah, we're about at the end of our Sure.
So should something
with this included?
With this included, I see. Okay,
Right.
so if we were to move forward with this, and there was something were to pop up, or there was some sort of request, we wouldn't have any capacity to meet that, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that, actually, intentionally, we're near the end, knowing the time frame that we have to spend the money and actually have things essentially come out of the ground and use it. It's challenging to spend the money into December for sure, and as much as anything, trying to get out and be strategic about how we use it. We've used a majority of the money internally for service enhancements and essentially things that will help us, I think, provide ongoing telework and services and physical distancing and those kinds of things for our staff. So safety and service. And then now looking for partnership models so that we can put some of the money in like this to fund the needs of the community that we've identified through COVID that have become obvious, right? The need for parents, my family is an example, families that have lost an income based on COVID, so a parent who's home with the kids. And the need there to put as many people back to work as possible for our community. One of the other things we're going to look to fund is an ongoing allocation to YCAP for vouchering. That was something we'd started in the very beginning of COVID for homeless and houseless individuals, some money for them to continue that program. And then the last project that we have in mind, is really a similar kind of thing, a partnership, and that it really comes into question, maybe more your question, which is sort of what do we have left? And I think as much as the ask is probably for more than we have, I think hopefully the folks that we're going to work with will accept what we can offer to provide partnership around hotspots and broadband and connectivity. So those are our last 3 projects right now.
Gotcha. Okay, that's super helpful. This question is more for maybe Shannon and Abisha. Again, thank you. This is super exciting. A number that stuck out is the 40%. That is for sponsors, right, that are participating in the corporate program. So if I understood the document you all sent us, that would be the children of folks affiliated with DCI, Spencer Family Foundation, Project Bloom, and Yamhill County BOC. Is that correct?
So,
yeah. Oh, do you want to go for it?
Sure, I'll jump in here. Thanks, Shannon.
Okay.
That's a great question, Bryce. So the 40%, yes, are essentially reserved for employees of DCI and any other sponsoring company. So we plan on bringing in additional corporate sponsors to utilize those spaces for workforce development. So this is, essentially it's a pay to play model where they pay into this sort of community center, right? And then they are able to reserve a certain number of spaces for their employees as a workforce development program. So based on the work that I do, this conversation started as workforce development because we know that in order to spur and continue to support our economy, we need people to have jobs, right? People need jobs to go to. And in order to do that, they need to have a safe place for their children. The idea though, is that once the Spencer family came to understand that this need is greater than just their workforce, and they had never heard childcare desert before this conversation started, and they went, oh my gosh, this is a problem. This is more systemic and global. I mean, kind of, micro global thought it was, and how do we serve the community? I mean, this business has been around in the Newberg Dundee area for 40 years. They have almost 300 employees here in the Newberg community. And they said, we need to do more. That's not enough. So they wanted to support their own employees. They also want to provide an opportunity for other corporate sponsors to come in and support their employees. But the model, the internal cost model, also supports a scholarship for children that maybe whose parents can't afford even the decreased cost model, or who maybe don't qualify for state funding. So that's why they said, let's do a 40-60 split. And let's say, we're going to reserve a certain amount for these sponsors. The rest is really for the community at large.
That makes sense. And the scholarship that's paired, does the scholarship fall in the 60 or in the 40?
So I think, go ahead.
So the way that they're structuring it, essentially the sponsorships would help to pay for the scholarship of the 60, right?
Of the 60.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, workforce, development and retention, I think, is huge. And so, yeah, 2 things that come to mind around it is like, one, what would it look like to prioritize partnerships in Newberg? Given, a lot of what we were talking about earlier around trying to encourage people to work here and to live here, and knowing that childcare is a big part of that. I think initially, if I'm honest, I was a little bit concerned around 40% feeling a bit high, and, wondering again how that number was landed on. And, might there be room for an increased number of space that is explicitly available to folks in Newberg, given all of the really good research you did and evidence as to why here in Newberg, obviously outside as well, but here in Newberg, there's a greater need. Because if my numbers are correct, it would have, with the current capacity estimate, it would mean only about 60, and I say only, knowing that that's still 60 kids who otherwise might not have childcare, but that would be, really restricted to about 60 kids at that 60% mark.
Yeah.
And maybe I did it wrong, Matt, you can correct me. But yeah, would love to hear about that.
I think you're asking great questions. And So I'll offer my perspective of the response. So first of all, you also can see the budget for the project, right? So the overall budget for the project. This is a private corporation, a private company coming in and saying, we care about this so much that we want to offer as much space as we possibly can for the children. And we only want to capture 40% of that for our own benefit and for another shared sponsor. The rest is for the community. And they're asking for the city's support and help, right? They're asking for permitting help. They're asking for help and also for a contribution financially. They're asking the county for a contribution financially, but whatever cost is left on the table at the end of the day, they will be bearing.
Well, wait, sorry, real quick. So to clarify, so because I think the one I see right now, this is the Spencer family you're talking about.
Spencer family are the owners of DCI. So they own DCI and they have a Spencer Family Foundation. So from the business side, they're contributing funds, and from the family foundation side, they're contributing funds. So so where I'm going with this is that they also want to provide more spaces, and they are going to be limited by the amount of space they have in the facility that they're going into. Then they have a phase 2 3-year plan to expand because they want to offer more spaces. So for them, part of this has to develop a financial model internally that will sustain the project and allow it to grow. So they need to have some corporate sponsors to contribute that 40% so that they can grow the 60% in size for phase 2. So they feel the same way that you do, that they want to actually expand on this and create more of a community serving project. But the best way to approach that is to have corporate sponsorship. And that's why they're starting there.
I see. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like Spencer Family and DCI, right now the commitment is $75,000. But if I heard you correctly, they are paying for like the filling up whatever the rest of the need is after other folks have gotten on board. Did I hear that correctly?
They're coming in with the seed funds, right? So the seed funding of, they also participate as a family in Project Bloom, who's contributing funds as well. So those 3 contributing partners are Spencer Family affiliates. They're contributing out of essentially those pots of funds, right? So these are the funding pots that we can contribute out of. They're also seeking funding, as Shannon mentioned, we're going to the state with an ask for support. We're looking at EDA funding. We have Family Foundation funding plan also with some of our larger foundation partners in the region. But whatever they come up short on, right, in terms of that total cost, they are ultimately on the hook for. And that's kind of the bottom line of this, right? So they put in seed funding. They said, we have a commitment. We have skin in the game. Now we're asking the county to have skin in the game. We're asking the city to have skin in the game. You know, I'm looking at Denise on the call here just because of your professional position. But these are the sorts of contributions that corporate partners need to have in order to attract additional funding. But in the long run, at the end of the day, if they don't land that funding, they're saying we are so committed that we will pony up the rest of this and or find those funds in the programmatic end of this project.
Whoa.
So to clarify, Councilor Coefield, the Spencer and Murphy families are actually contributing $225,000 to this project up front. And then they carry the financial risk for the program moving forward, which is why it's important to wrap around private agencies who are willing to do more than they have to because they want to with the public funding support, especially because we haven't found solutions up until this point that provide us with the needs that we have for workforce and childcare. And just to clarify, DCI expects that they would need approximately 30 spots based on their own internal survey that they were wise to do before even starting this conversation. And then they're reserving another 20 or more for other corporate sponsors. A similar financial model, I know that some of you in the community might be familiar with this. CTEC is a CTE educational partnership. My lights just went off. I'm sorry, people. There we go. I just had to move. So it's another example of a private-public partnership in a different sector. It's workforce development with CTE, career and technical education with the Salem-Keizer School District. And the way they were able to stand up that educational component that their school district needed was to involve private corporate sponsors. So when you tour the facility, you do see the corporate sponsorships that went into it, but that created the financial solvency of the model so that it could be launched and that it could be sustained. And a bit of a trivia, Brick designed CTEC as well. So really solid partnerships.
I appreciate your thoughtful questions, Councilor Coefield. Thank you for those thoughtful questions. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, I have two more, but I'll let other councilors go.
Hold on a second. Let's make sure and let's identify in as we come again for the listening audience, if we could. Thank you. All right, let's go to Denise. Thanks, Denise.
Hi. I just want to say, like, this is the most amazing project. Every time I'm so proud of Newberg, because whenever like these really amazing things that people say cannot be done, they get done here, and we just get to be such a great model. This is not a today problem. This was a yesterday problem too. We've been talking about it for years. There just isn't anything out there that's working. It's not working for childcare providers. It's not working for parents. It's a system that is not working. And to do something so incredible as this, to bring people together, to provide a service. You know, my other work project, Nurturing Newberg, is about providing environments where families feel nurtured. And this fits perfectly into that alignment, because if your child's not safe, how do you feel, right? You're not nurtured, your child's not nurtured. And my hat's off to all of you. And, you know, I'll support you in both hats, because I'm just so thrilled to see something like this happening. It's actually amazing. It's like magic. It's like a magic trick.
It's not magic. It's great partners.
I want to say the same thing. I just like, this actually makes me emotional talking about, I'll just say I, had to take out loans to pay for childcare, to work 12-hour days during COVID, and I'm taking significant financial hit. And I am not someone that needs this program, but, I think about all my staff at Providence, and, the amount we've asked frontline workers to contribute. Childcare is like at the very top, and our organization has not come up with a solution. So this just actually makes me super emotional. So thank you to both of you for championing this.
Anyone else? All right, not to rain on the parade too much, but a couple of questions. Looking at this, it's proposing 115,000 of our current allotment of 706,000 will go towards this project. Is that correct? Yes. And then it's going to be paid to the Spencer Family Foundation is how it's going to be done. They are then going to be the organizers of this program through their foundation, not as a separate nonprofit. It's going to be their own foundation. Okay. One thing I must say, in the reading, I didn't know that the Spencer Family Foundation had anything to do with DCI, nor did I know what Project Bloom was. And again, maybe that's because I'm not near childcare and haven't been for 30 plus years. And maybe that's why, but it wasn't clear to me. And then Little Bird Childcare. Now, are they associated then with DCI, Project Bloom, and the Spencer Family Foundation?
No, they're a separate entity. Yeah,
separate entity. And yes. As I did Google them I could find, they're based in Lafayette, McMinnville, and Salem.
Yes, correct.
Right. Okay. Is this facility going to be here in Newberg?
Yes.
Both stages of the facility will be here in Newberg. And so Brick Architecture right now is developing 2 feasibility studies on 2 locations, one for an immediate short-term need and one for the long-term legacy project. Okay. Both of them within Newberg city limits.
Okay. And back, I think Bryce had asked this question. If we are giving 115,000 essentially to a private entity, right? I'd imagine Little Bird Childcare is a for-profit entity, I think, from Googling them. Okay. I'd just like to know, I guess, how much that's going to be for subsidy for children and families that could not otherwise afford it. That would be, and the other thing is, I understand that, DCI, and I think Tim Murphy and what he's been doing just to even bring this up is fantastic, and you all as well. But But again, I think if we are going to be using even COVID or CARES money, that we need to make sure that that is directed to some kind of subsidy for people that cannot otherwise afford this. Otherwise, my feeling is that we would be, in essence, supporting an individual business to the tune of 115,000, which is fine. But I think that there's enough need out there, as has been demonstrated, as Stephanie said, as Elise said, on with Head Start. The other question is in this, were there no providers in Newberg that could have done this service? I guess is one question rather than Little Bird. And then I guess the other one is, CPRD has been providing childcare service, I believe, in some of the school buildings. And I'd like to know, have they been contacted, number one? And secondly, is the school district planning on paying as well? Are they going to contribute some money towards this or not? So there you go. Those are my questions.
Yeah, I can start answering some of those questions and then I'll turn it over to Shannon. So I think we can divide and conquer on this one. So in terms of the cost and what is it going to fund, when I submitted a request to the Board of Commissioners for funding on this project, we needed to make sure that it would qualify for CARES Act reimbursement. So I worked with Ken Huffer and County Council Christian Burnish, apologize to him for me, Doug, because I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, to identify the things that we felt confident could be reimbursed. I did that same process when we went through working with Shannon and trying to identify what were the costs that we were confident could be reimbursed for and also would be expended by both parties before the end of the calendar year, right? So that's one of the tricky parts of this, is the timing to be done. So that is why we've asked to cover the costs of the feasibility work and the architectural and design work. So we do believe that that is fully reimbursable because of the type of program that it's covering. And in this case, the answer to your question as to whether or not the funds that you're contributing would go directly toward that 60%. In this case, no, because we're not asking you to pay for the scholarship. What we're trying to do is expend the funds in the time given on a project that supports the community ongoing. But by paying for a portion of this cost, it allows the program to come in with a position where they can bring on some of those kind of private, more community-based childcare spots faster. In terms of being able to identify a Newberg childcare provider. So the childcare provider that we're partnering with has multiple locations in Yamhill County. One of the reasons why she does not have a Newberg facility, well, there's two that she has pointed out. She has been trying to open a facility in the city of Newberg and cannot get through the finding a location issue that many of our business partners have in the city of Newberg. And also the very high SDC charges is what she would call them, the very high SDC charges that exist both in the city of Newberg and in McMinnville. There are multiple projects in Yamhill County around childcare that are desperately looking for corporate partners. I did reach out to one Newberg service provider who is well-known, well-respected, has in-home care. She has an ESL program for her childcare facilities, and she did not want to expand her business. There were others that had been spoken to, but Little Bird Childcare is one in Yamhill County that has the experience and the ability to expand and was looking for a corporate partner so that she could come to Newberg, because in her opinion, that was the best approach. She had actually been trying to approach Providence and other partners to identify an opportunity for a corporate partnership. In terms of CPRD and school district, I can turn it over to Shannon to answer that portion.
Yeah, those are great questions as well. So even as we are talking to several different partners, the Project Oasis team has been very mindful about competition and scarcity of resources, making sure that we're lifting up our partner organizations and not competing in a way that detracts, deflects, or
duplicates
any of the resources available. And I think, Councilor Coefield had also made the comment, I mean, sure, serving 60 kids is great, but there are more kids, which is why we need all of these options coming together. This is one part of the solution. And even with this, we're still not able to solve the need immediately. We're getting there, we're approaching it, but this is an interim process. And Abishai and I are actually meeting with Matt Compton on Thursday morning from CPRD and the CARES program. They were CARES before we had the CARES Act. I know it's kind of confusing, but the after and before school care, and then the 4-hour modular support with the school district. So we're having those conversations as well, so that we are doing this with community integrity. And then the school district is looking at different ways to partnership, and that's still in development. One aspect of need that Little Bird has identified, and just building out the general model, is staffing support. And that may be an exchange or an opportunity that the school district could provide, possibly. So some of the partnerships are in kind, some of them are financial, and some of them are still working through that process to discover what the best fit is for the center ultimately. Did that answer your questions, Mayor?
Yeah, it did. Now, the other thing is, what do you all project as the cost of childcare from the center if someone was paying the full cost?
Oh.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, here, I'll help you out. The math, as I read this, at 1.7 million for 150 kids, right? And that's for a half-year subsidy, first 6 months of operating expense. You're talking something on the order of 11,400 per kid for 6 months, or 22,850 per year. Now, again, just from my vantage, I mean, I love the idea, I love the concept, love the idea because of what we're doing, you know, for economic development. Abishai, we talked about this many times, as you said, that there are many components, this being one, housing being another, education, etc. But I just want to make sure that if we're doing this and there's kids out there, that our 115,000 is going to go to help subsidize the kids that can't otherwise afford it. And that's really my thing on this, because and if you can say that, all right, again, it's still, unless we know, at least I know what the ultimate cost of this is going to be to somebody, it's hard for me to get my head around it.
And I don't have, thank you.
I have numbers.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I don't have the numbers of the actual childcare cost. And I just want to make sure that we're looking at the total number, because it's 150 slots for childcare and 45 slots for the distance learning. So it's 195 kids. And we've asked the county to pay for the entire cost of the staffing and the services, the build out space, and all of the telelearning sort of technical requirements for those 45 kids. So it's 195 kids that will be in this space. And the size and scope of the project will be dictated by the amount of funding they're able to secure. But what they are absolutely committed to is opening as quickly as possible to serve the need as soon as they can in the right way, for around that 150 kids and in childcare and 45 in distance learning. So it's 195.
And if I can jump in real quick, that you also have to keep in mind the parameter that we have, which is to spend the money by a certain date. And so we needed to pick something where we might have leverage in the future, and exactly what you're asking for. That was part of the discussions we had around spending any of the CARES Act money on this, but knowing that we had a limited window to actually spend it. So reserving a right, as it were, by participating in the project and making sure we moved it forward to hopefully be successful, and then have the option for the community members that do need it.
So if I could,
sorry. Just one of the things that's a little challenging at this point is COVID money and the CARES money. We're not seeing alternatives to possibly get to the 706,000 in my mind. So we've been talking about moteling. I understand that money is now run out. We're talking about childcare, but what I don't see is where we're lining up all of the possibilities to say, here's our best option. The other thing with this here, I get the 115,000, and I understand that you've got to do build out, et cetera, but it would make me more comfortable, like you mentioned, Abishai, that the county is paying for X, Y, and Z. I would love to know what we're paying for with 115,000. you know, and this idea that we have to, you know, spend it or lose it. Yeah, but remember, it still comes from somebody's pocket, right? So that's my feeling. So anyway, there it is. But I'd like to know more.
Mayor, if I
I
could
also,
carry on. I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Finley.
Shannon, go ahead.
so
I'm making a million notes with all the answers that I have to questions that haven't come back up, and we're getting more questions than I can answer in a timely manner. So please forgive me. So the portion that we're requesting from CARES Act funding tonight covers the feasibility study, and regardless of how the model is eventually developed, we don't have a building plan or the infrastructure without a feasibility plan. We have to start there. It's one of the ground level components, and that creates the model for all people in our community to participate in this program. So that's what this funding would specifically cover, the feasibility on both locations, which eventually gives us a model where we can have subsidized childcare for our community. As far as specific numbers, some people participating in the child care center will pay the average going rate of $1,200 to $1,400 a month. But remember, part of our child care desert is that even for people who could pay more, there are not available spots. You could pay $3,000 a month and you still don't have a provider available to take your children. So having people pay at the average rate, $1,200 to $1,400, but some will also be paying $200 a month, which can feel like winning the lottery for a family who doesn't have those same options. And these financial models were given to Project Oasis after having been tested by Little Bird Child Care Center, who does run this model already as a business and as a subject expert. So the $200 model, that's Little Bird's expertise in applying the ERDC funds, which, if you're not familiar, it's almost like a Section 8 voucher. So it's a state subsidy toward childcare costs. And then the mixed model itself shows that the balance of funding, with some people paying $200 with subsidy and some people paying full price, this creates a financially solvent model for the center. We're also aware that we don't want to use the short-term money and then be needing financial solutions in 3 years when we're past the pandemic. So this also creates its opportunities. And because we're already thinking about how do we leverage the money we do have and the people who can pay for the people who can't pay, that's part of the conversation right now to address that.
Okay, great, thank you. I think, Jules, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question. So thank you, Shannon and Abisha, for all the work you've done. So who would this be serving in terms of like family income, like salary wise? Like, because you said 1,200, 1,400 about average, which thinking about a lot of our like Latinx families, they can't afford that. A lot of the families who are, you know, working day in and day out there, it's just not realistic. So like, do you have like more or less a figure of like, this is the population that we're going to be serving? Like in terms of like yearly income, like this is who we're going to be. And that's also just, I think, just to reiterate a little bit on Rick's hesitancy, I think I just want to know who we're serving. Like if it's not the like lowest income folks, that's fine. I just want for us all to have a good idea of who we're serving.
So thank you for that question, Councilor. The internal programmatic model is still being built out, but as Shannon read in the kind of program announcement, they're trying to serve the wage earner. So they're looking at, you know, people who are making minimum wage, people who are making kind of just above minimum wage, and that's the target audience for the majority of those slots and also for the scholarship. When Shannon referred to the full rate of that $1,200 to $1,400 a month, that's actually the ERDP. Am I getting the acronym correct? The ERDP reimbursement rate for the ERTP reimbursement rate, which the city of Newberg has the highest reimbursement rate in all of Yamhill County because the cost of living is higher, so more associated to the Portland metro area, and because there is so fewer childcare positions or slots available for children. So the need is so high that they pay more. So in that kind of model that Shannon presented you, that's actually also the payment model for those folks, which as she also mentioned, kind of having folks either private pay or ERTC model can help to subsidize the others. So they don't have a model broken out to say, you know, we want to serve single mothers or people making just this wage, but their current model speaks to underserved populations and people who are wage earners. That's their target audience for those spots. And that's where the $100 model kind of comes into play.
I can also put a dollar per hour amount on this target audience for where the center is beginning. $13.50 an hour is the basis of this financial formula. And it really comes back to John Spencer's mission to help those people who need it most first, and then figure out how to make it sustainable beyond that. And that's part of the financial investment that DCI, Project Bloom, and the Spencer Family Foundation are putting in this to start the subsidy until the additional funding or the long-term funding comes in for scholarships or for other community relief, financial relief. But $13.50 an hour, which, I mean, that's not huge. So it's a good place to start for the people who need it the most.
I have a couple of things. So I also have the same hesitation about trying to figure out exactly what this means, because we know when COVID hit that we were going to see particular gaps in children whose families are marginalized, that we know that the educational gap is going to be there. And my concern is if programs like this are going to widen that gap, if we know we need childcare, there's no doubt about it at every economic level. But my concern is around how the unintended consequences of widening that gap between the children who are marginalized and not going to get these educational services, and then providing this for kids who may already have some resources that those other kids don't have. So those are some of, like, I'd like to hear more about, are we going to cater to Spanish speaking families and those kinds of things? And then the other question I have is around the staff and what they're going to be paid and what their education level is. Because I know one of the things that I ran into, especially when I was looking for childcare, preschools, that kind of thing for my kids, is that oftentimes childcare facilities and workers are paid very little, and they have huge turnover rates because of that. We settled on a place for us that we knew that they paid a little bit more and they didn't have huge turnover rates. And so that's something that I would be concerned about, because for me, I want to look at this globally. So if we are having childcare workers who are making barely minimum wage, for me, I want to look at that because I don't want to continue to perpetuate childcare workers not getting paid what they need to be paid in a time and a space where they're the most at risk. And so those are some of my concerns around this, is making sure that we're looking at paying good wages for staff, but also how we're not widening that gap between the already marginalized families that are struggling even more, and when their kids do go back to school, are not going to see the same kind of results as kids who have some more of the resources.
Yeah. Thank you for your comment, Councilor. And this is one of the reasons why when the DCI or the Spencer family, the DCI family said, how do we do childcare? We don't know how to do childcare. That's not our core competency. I said, please, for everyone's sake, don't try to figure out how to do childcare. Please identify a well-known, well-reputable childcare service provider who knows exactly what they're doing and is trained and educated in early learning and has a reliable staff, and partner with that person to do childcare. And that's what DCI has done with the partner Little Bird. So she has a couple of facilities, as was mentioned earlier. We toured her Salem childcare facility, and she also has a preschool out there. And we asked her about turnover. We asked her about how she pays her employees. We asked her about how she maintains certification and kind of her culture, right? And she has had the Salem facility open for 2 years and has only one staff position that has turned over out of 4. And her average, she said, basically everybody's been here the whole 2 years. I can't speak entirely to the wages that she pays every single employee, but so I can't give you those numbers. And I do not have, unless Shannon has a projection on that of that on her sheet in front of her. But I can say that they partnered with a service provider who is not a bare bones service provider who's just getting started and having to learn alongside, right? We partnered with a subject matter expert. This is one of the reasons why we've partnered with Brick Architecture, who does design for these sort of facilities. And we've brought in the school district, and we've brought in these other partners like from the Early Learning Hub, is to make sure that as the internal programming and that model for application of services for the community is built out, that it's done with care and thought, and that we're essentially approaching some of these other program partners and saying what's needed in our community and who are the underserved peoples in the community and what really is the need out there. So we're approaching it with that mindset while this internal programming is being developed. So I appreciate your concerns, because those are concerns that have been voiced by this group as well.
I know.
All right, let me,
Sorry,
Bryce,
I know.
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. And this can be quick. We don't necessarily need to get fully into answers, and you can. Like, honestly, where I'm at, I love the idea of this. It's hard for me to vote and support without having a little more information. And so I think a few things in particular that I'd like to know. One, maybe this is more so for Dan, like what is realistically the timeline? Dan, you mentioned funding something in December is honestly really hard. We're still in October. So getting an idea of, if we were to move forward, like what is that sort of last date that we need to either put this through, or it's just not going to happen, would be helpful. The other question is around the percentage of the 60. My sense, Abhishek, from hearing you, is that the 40% that's reserved for the private and non-private committed partners is really like non-negotiable. So if that's the case, I mean, if it's not, that'd be cool. Like, I would want to negotiate so we can open up more percentage for Newberg folks. But if that's not negotiable, then what I'd be interested in is what percentage, and this is getting back to Jules' question, what percentage of the 60 are being reserved for low SES folks? Like, having a commitment that says out of the 60, 50% of the 60, right? Or what are they, like 80? I can't do math. Math's better at it, right? But we are making that commitment, because right now my fear would be that, again, the heart and the spirit, I think, is good to maybe be able to provide support for folks that maybe pay $200 a month, which I think is great. But if that's only 1 or 2 children, or 10% of the 60, and the other 50% of that 60 are folks paying that 12 and 14, again, we can have the greatest intentions, but the impact is not going to be what I think we hope for. So understand, like, what percentage of the 60 we're committing to say this will be reserved for these families. The last thing I'll say, and this is going back to Little Bird, I don't know it, I'm sure it's great. If we are potentially like reaching out to specific communities, I would like to know more about how Little Bird in particular has demonstrated the ability to care for these particular communities, knowing that the needs are not always all the same, right? So someone asked around Spanish-speaking teachers, do they employ Spanish-speaking teachers, would be good to know. Yeah, what is the overall composition, thinking racially and ethnically as well, of the folks that are hired? Could we maybe even commit to saying, if we move forward with this, we are going to hire X, Y, and Z, or intentionally try to reach out to folks who represent the broader communities that we're intentionally trying to target, right? So those would be the things that I would frankly need to have more information on before being able to vote up. But I love the idea.
So let me try to answer at least the first part, which was the timing, and I think it maybe. I'm going to try to answer some of the other stuff actually as well, if possible, just because I'm a little bit looking at the time and realizing we have other substantive issues on the agenda as well. But part of the timing here is really driven by commitment. We're trying to make a financial commitment to the project to move it forward. So it is really focused on a feasibility study. And that's the seed money. That's what you all are approving, is a feasibility study that would then that's what you're considering, that would then get this project launched, which has a whole lot more detail. I mean, you guys are all, as council, we're way into the weeds on this, and it's great conversation, but it's also, we, the city, are intentionally, very intentionally not providing this service, right? You know, that was something we were not trying to get into. We were trying to move forward a priority. The priority is to make sure that we have more available slots for childcare in the community, and trying to build a partnership as well to do that, so that we're not funding, the city isn't funding it. So really what we're looking for, and the reason we put it on the agenda today, was to try to get the commitment now to then move forward with the next step. And then, you know, really, you know, trying to move forward on the other projects. I mean, certainly there are other things I'm sure we could find other ways to spend $115,000. But the way we've approached this is to look at the priorities related to COVID. That's both key for CARES Act, but also key for the community, I think, in terms of getting the most bang for the buck, and not necessarily, we're not looking to give back all the money. We're not looking to, you know, spend it willy-nilly, but we really saw the impact of childcare on employees in particular, and their ability to come to work at all levels. You know, and I understand it would be perfect if we could, you know, run through the entire system and essentially hit every demographic and make sure that it was perfect. But right now, what we're trying to do is really just fund a feasibility study to then decide if that would be, you know, something to move forward with. And I think we feel like we've got a good project, but that's kind of what we're talking about. It's not necessarily to build it, to run it, you know, all of those things. And so, you know, I don't know if Shannon, if you have more to add to that, but you know, the timing. Okay.
We are literally cutting off our nose to spite our face here. We're talking about details. People are looking for childcare, all people. When you add that many slots to a community that doesn't have childcare, you open extreme doors for everyone. It doesn't matter. But getting in these details of being so worried that we're not going to be doing what needs to be done, we're not doing what needs to be done. And it's a little exhaustive, because I don't know if you understand how humongous an opportunity you are looking at. It is an incredible opportunity to spend money that people would kill to be in the position you are in at this very moment. Like, you don't even understand how amazing this is. And you're getting caught in details that will matter way more if we don't do this. More people will not have daycare. So it's exhausting.
Okay,
sorry for exhausting you.
Bryce, just 1 second. Okay, Dan's alluded to the time. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to do a temperature check on this one here and see where we are, and let's go around, because, you know, again, it took us to now in this presentation to understand that we are funding a feasibility study. That's what it is, right? Now I get that. It's taken me, sorry, I'm slow, but that's what's taken. I need to go around and see. I'm just going to go around and ask whether you're ready to vote on this or not. Bryce, you start. Yes or no?
No.
Okay, let's go. Stephanie.
I'll vote, but it's, you know, I certainly think that it could have been a little more transparent.
Elise.
Yeah, I could vote.
Okay. Jules?
Yes.
You'd vote. Denise?
Yes.
Okay, and I would not. So, but the votes carry. So let's go on. If you're at enough of a point, let's go ahead and make a resolution, unless somebody's got another particularly burning question.
I guess I just wanted to make a recommendation, if it's possible. I was just going to recommend, knowing that we are trying to, and I appreciate all the work that's been done around trying to get seed money, and that's a fun task. So I guess I'm just wondering if, even though we're just voting on a feasibility study, if it might help the council to get a couple of these questions answered to frame the feasibility study for a vote next council meeting. I really don't want this to, I really think that we have an opportunity to frame for the funders what the intent of the seed money for the feasibility study should be directed towards. I've done that on projects, and although it may not carry, it at least is in writing that that's the intent of our seed dollars, and get in the concerns brought forward by Councilor Finley and Coefield and Martinez Pancarte. I think that would be totally reasonable, and I think that those funders would understand our desire to do that.
And I think I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that that's entirely possible. I think that it's not if we don't approve the funding. That would be the question, right? You know, and that was our intent in putting this forward, was really to get the leverage in this conversation to then be more expansive in what's offered, and to make sure that we are, you know, at the table essentially, and part of the conversation in scoping this project, because of what we saw as an impact, you know, the idea of opening up and creating these slots. And, you know, certainly I welcome and appreciate the feedback from all of you about what you'd like to see. I think we can bring that, and I see Abisha, you know, ready with copious notes to take that to the table. But, you know, again, we don't get to have that say without putting the seed money in to participate.
Okay, I
To
just
clarify, is there, sorry, real quick, I have to ask this question. Is there not an ability, to clarify, is there not an ability to have some of the questions answered before voting? Or in your opinion, because of the immediate need of this feasibility fund, we have to vote tonight? Because I want to support this, I also would like to have some more answers.
We're not trying to necessarily, you know, have you vote before it's ready. I think we could push it off. I think the risk of doing that, though, is that, you know, it delays the project to the point where, you know, you start to run into the feasibility of spending the county's CARE Act money, and that deadline on the December 31st. You know, there's a short timeline to get all of those things, all those moving parts spent and done in order to comply with the federal requirements, the timeline. So I don't know, I can't speak to the county's timeline and how it would affect it, but, you know, we start to get into, you know, the 2-week increments of our meetings to be able to have an approval. That's all.
Well, okay. I mean, sorry. You know, I guess the thing for me is, you know, I understand, okay, it's a feasibility study, but I still not totally sure. And I don't think it's a lot to ask who do we think we're going to serve? Sorry, I don't think, if feasibility study or not, I don't think that's a lot to ask. And right now, I can't vote in good conscience for it without knowing that. I'll just be honest. But I think at this point, you've got enough people that feel that they can vote tonight. So why doesn't somebody make a motion and see how we go?
Is it possible to add into the motion, though, with what some of our intentions of the seed money is for? Or sorry, and the intention of the populations we hope to serve with the seed money that we are giving for the feasibility study, or?
I mean,
No.
I have a hard time crafting that language right now. I got to tell you, I do. I mean, so we got some back feed here somewhere, but I don't know. What do y'all think? You could certainly craft the motion as you see fit, you know?
Well, I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution 2020-3706.
All right, a second?
Second.
Goes with a second. All right, further discussion.
Can I make an amendment to the resolution?
You can ask the person who made the motion.
What's your amendment?
Can we amend that with recommendation to the funders that attention will be placed towards marginalized populations with a representative percentage towards the Latinx community?
I'm not sure that's our place to ask that, but we could
we're recommending it, not
It is our hope.
enforcing it.
It is our
It is
hope.
our,
It is our
okay.
hope. I could accept that. Jules?
Yes.
All right, now further discussion.
I'm really proud that I get to be a part of this exciting task you guys have taken on. Having childcare, I quit my job because I couldn't afford childcare and stayed home with my child. I left a high-paying job to stay home, and that caused insane stress. Shannon's got to do a dance so her light comes back on, and that caused extreme financial stress to my family. If I could have had childcare available, and there wasn't any at the time, there still isn't any today. There are women sitting at home whose jobs need them who can't find childcare. This happened last year. It's happening twice as much today, and it will happen 5 times greater. These numbers are not data. These are my guess, right? It's just going to multiply out when the world reopens and people are going to want their employees to come back to work, and these childcare providers have moved on to something new and are not going to be available anymore. It's a huge, huge thing we're doing, and I appreciate your work.
All right, other
Thank you,
comments?
Denise, thank you. I think you and I can agree that this is a huge need, right? And I want to be very clear. And Denise, I'm speaking to you. I'm sorry if I exhausted you with my
No,
questions.
I mean,
it was unclear who the you was when you were saying.
No, just the conversation when it's
yeah.
such a high need that we're
absolutely.
that it's taking.
And it's taking time, right? And I think we're in support. And I think for all the reasons that you see the need and I see the need is why I'm pushing as much as I am to get commitments to a prioritization of those who have the highest needs. And why it's hard. And I'm sitting here trying to like stall, not through talking, but I want to make a wise decision that meets needs, but to Councilor Finley's point, doesn't result in widening a gap that we already see, right? I think all of us are wanting to reduce that gap. So we are in alignment with an attempt to meet these needs. Again, I'm really just looking for commitments to those who have the most significant needs in our community.
All right, other comments?
Yeah, I'm prepared to vote yes on this. And as a parent of 2 small children, I actually do know what this means. But I do also know that for me, it might be hard, but for people of marginalized communities, it's even harder than that. And so I want to be clear about, we are going to hand over some money to this. I suspect this won't be the last time we will talk about putting money into a project like this. And so I think it's beholden on us to let people know what we expect down the road if we are going to be giving money to projects like this.
Yeah, and I got to weigh in. I first off, I feel that even if it's a feasibility study, I needed a lot more information. With all due respect, Abisha and Shannon, I would have liked to have heard from DCI directly. I would have liked to have heard from the Spencer family and possibly even from Little Bird Childcare for something like this. Even if it's a feasibility, I understand that we got to get out of the gate. But I'm going to have a real hard time voting for it without greater specifics, even on the feasibility study. So I'm sorry. And again, Tim, and to the Spencer family and all of that, I think it's fantastic. I just think I need more information before agreeing to spend $116,000.
The one thing I wanted just to make a comment on, and I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with the comments that Stephanie just made. But right now during COVID, there are such a lack of resources that are actually available coming forward. So I'm voting yes on this because I hope that we can encourage the correct, or our hope for the populations that they serve, but to vote no would completely take it off the table.
And I will also be voting yes on this. I would have liked more information as well. But I agree with, what folks are saying. Voting no today would be just not even putting it on the table. But I do, from a community or coming from a low income community and from the Latinx community, who oftentimes we don't know what childcare is. It's the older sibling taking care of their younger brother and sister. That's what childcare is for us. So I just wanted, to put out my input for you all to know that a little bit more. So thank you all.
If I can just clarify, I would vote for this in a second, right? Just to make sure that you know that I totally believe in this. I totally get it, but I don't have enough information. That's it simply. So there you go. Anybody else? All right. Let's go ahead and call for the question. Ray, if you, all those in favor of the resolution, where is it? Authorizing a contribution of $115,785 of CARES Act dollars to Spencer Family Foundation Project Oasis, as Denise mentioned and Jules seconded, signify by raising your left hand. And I've got 4 or 5. And opposed? All right. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Shannon, Abhishek. Thank you. It's a late evening, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Can we get a 5-minute break?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, while you do that, I want to talk to Dan and to Doug at this point, if everybody else wants to take a break.
Thank you for the great conversation and good questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. 5-minute break. Okay, so Dan and Doug.
You still got people watching, so just be.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, no, it's nothing. It's now 9:30. And we've got 2 legislative hearings still to go tonight. And we want to talk about committee assignments.
We can definitely move the committee assignments conversation. That's not a huge thing, right? I mean, it's Doug.
These are both hefty. I mean, CET is hefty and the SDC, well, SDC is probably not as much, but CET is pretty hefty. So I don't know what y'all want to do.
You do have 4 people who on the line that want to speak too. So
right,
just to let you know that you do have that the public waiting.
Did I also hear
so
oh, sorry, go ahead, Doug.
I'm just Mayor, so there is no definitive timeline on this. Right. We were back in April and going to bring it forward, and I said I bring it back in October. Right. And so here it is. It's October.
Check that box.
Absolutely, boss. I checked the box.
I know. Okay.
One of the things you could consider, and Truman could provide some feedback, you could open the hearing and at least take the testimony from those who are waiting to testify, and then we could continue this hearing to November 2nd.
Right. Didn't I hear, I think Truman mentioned this today, that this was only going to be the first reading anyway because some of the language?
Yes, based on some of the comments that I was going through, I was going to give you a list of who's commented, but there are some comments that would require us to do 2 readings and some modifications. So one option, open the hearing, take the testimony from those that are there. We've got some comments. We can take that back, make some adjustments, and then put it back for your first full reading on November 2nd. And then that would put your second reading, basically your first meeting, second meeting in November.
Okay.
In case there's any additional changes.
But if we did that, would we also have to do staff report, or can we go straight into the public comment?
Truman, you got any feedback on that?
Well, if you're following the adopted hearing procedure, you would take the staff report, although Doug or Karin or whoever could give a abbreviated version. Then you could take the public comment and then close the public comment, and then it would just require a motion to carry to the next meeting or to a date certain.
So I could do a staff report that says before you use a proposal for a construction excise tax.
Yeah.
All
Well, I
the
think-
materials in writing.
Right. I've got a note here from Ezra, and from the Home Builders Association. He said that, you know, he would support a continuance, and there happens to be another person who's going to make public comment right over my shoulder who said that she would also happily make it in the beginning of November. So, I mean, the other thing would be to check with Charlie. I think Charlie Harris was going to speak. Ezra, I think, has already said he would hang out until November 2nd. And I think that's it. I think that's gonna be-
Well, you had, so from what I had on my list is I believe Charlie Harris was going to speak. Ezra was going to speak from HBA.
Right.
We have Jesse Nemec came in late this evening. He wanted to speak.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Robert Suppy is online or not, but he submitted me some comments as well. And
Okay.
then we had Merrill Kunkel provided some comments, and then Philip
Written
Higgins
comment. Yeah.
had already had comments in the packet.
Right. Okay. You know, it's your pleasure, folks. I mean, if you want to open it, give it a brief one. We'll get the public comments. We're going to have to open public comments the next time anyway, though, right?
Yeah, you would give them, basically have two opportunities.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Sound like a reasonable plan? All right,
Yep.
let's do it then. Okay, let's do that. I'll be right back.
As will I.
Denise, hey, I know we haven't started yet. Yeah, just to clear things again, I don't know if you were speaking specifically to me. I think-
No. Just
Yeah, that makes sense.
the
I don't think
understanding of
For sure.
how much this is needed. And she mentioned subsidized daycare
Yeah.
3 times. You know, we have to
Yeah.
understand
Right.
need is huge.
Exactly. And that's
For
where,
everyone.
I think a couple things that came to mind, because it did feel, personal. And again, I think that was clear to me. That wasn't your intent, but I think that's what gets tricky with like you language. Is it's unclear. It's like, who is you? Like, you talking to me?
I said,
you
I
talking to
said,
me?
this is
Yeah.
exhausting. I don't remember what I said.
Sure. No, it's okay. It makes sense. It makes sense. But
Yes.
we're good. I'm good. You're good. We're good. Just
I'm
wanted
good.
to
I'm good. It got
make sure we're
passed.
clear.
We met,
For sure.
we did an incredible step in a project that no one's ever seen before. And it is amazing, and it will help a lot of our businesses, and it will help a lot of our people. So
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
ask for more
No,
than that.
For sure. No, I am in support of helping the people. Most definitely, of course.
Well, all right, we'll leave it at that. All right, so we just had a discussion. Is everybody more or less back on how to handle the rest of the evening, as we've got 2 pretty lengthy items still on the agenda. But what we've come to, and hope this will work for everybody, is we're going to start with a staff report by Doug. He'll give us a brief staff report on the construction excise tax. And then I think we're going to take public comment, and then we're going to close, and then we are going to continue until November 2nd. So I think that'll be the plan. As it was, we were going to use this as a first reading anyway, so we will just extend it to November 2nd. Anybody who has not commented or would like to comment additionally, we can add that to, we'll reopen the public comments. So that having been said, does that make a semblance of sense, I hope? Okay, here we go. All right, so let me find my papers. All right, this is a is everybody back? We're all back, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right, this is a legislative public hearing on Ordinance 2020-2860, an ordinance establishing a construction excise tax and creating Chapter 3.60 in the Newberg Municipal Code. All right, the hearing is now called to order, and testimony procedure, we will take 5 minutes each from anyone who would like to speak at this moment. We'll start with proponents first, opponents, and undecided following. And let me start with a declaration of conflict of interest. All right, so for all of us out there in the listening audience, when an elected public official is met with an actual or potential conflict of interest, the public official must publicly announce the nature of the conflict of interest once on each occasion that the issue giving rise to the conflict occurs. If met with a potential conflict of interest following the public announcement, the public official may continue to participate in his or her official capacity in any discussion, debate, or vote on the issue per ORS 244.1202A. The reason I say this is I have a potential conflict of interest as my day job is with Habitat for Humanity here in town, and the subject of affordability could potentially have a financial benefit to the organization for which I work. So there is my declared conflict. And I will do so at every one of these most likely. So sorry, but that's the way it'll be. But anybody else, potential conflict or actual conflict of interest or abstention? Okay, hearing none. Let's move to the abridged staff report. We'll get a more detailed staff report, I hope, on November 2nd. Doug, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So in the abridged version of the staff report, you have before you, as the mayor indicated, a proposal for a construction excise tax that would add Chapter 3.60 to the Newberg Municipal Code. I think at this point, I would turn it back to the mayor to provide opportunity for public comment.
Thank you very much, Doug. On my order of speaking, it looks like I have Charlie Harris for the first speaker. Good evening, Mr. Harris.
Good evening. I can't see myself. Can everybody see me?
Nope.
Yes?
No, we just unmuted you to speak.
Oh, okay. Good to know. As Mayor Rogers said, my name is Charlie Harris, and I'm here to testify today in support of the passage of the construction excise tax. My experience with affordable housing in Newberg includes as a developer, as a landlord, as a member of the Housing Newberg Task Force that originated these proposals, and as a member on 3 different city committees looking at affordable housing. I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody that there's an overwhelming need for affordable housing here in Newberg, nor is there adequate funding for such affordable housing. In this regard, the construction excise tax is one means of addressing the lack of funding. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not the exhaustive solution to everything. But not only will it provide additional funds in its own right, but it can also serve as a source of local match to leverage other funds from the state, from the federal government, from private banks, institutions. And so this is not, I think the beauty of the excise tax is it does provide local funding that can be used in a variety of projects. That said, I know that there in the packet, there are a couple of arguments expressed in opposition to the tax, and I'd like to address a couple of those arguments. One, dealing with the cost of the housing or its impact on the impact of the construction excise tax on the cost of the housing. And secondly, that now is just not the right time to pass such a tax. Regarding opposition to the tax on the basis of the cost, I'd like to point out that the added expense of the tax can easily be offset by a myriad of incentives that the tax could fund. Looking at section 3.60.100, which is on page 7 of Exhibit A of the ordinance, which is the ordinance, it outlines several of these incentives. For developers, possible incentives include density bonuses, minimum lot size adjustments, fee waivers, SDC reductions, SDC waivers, and expedited permitting processes, among others. For homeowners and renters, the incentives include property taxes, lower property taxes, down payment assistance. Control your dog.
Sorry.
And sorry, so for homeowners and renters, the incentives include lower property taxes, down payment assistance, and rent subsidies, among others. Those are in response to the argument regarding cost. Regarding the argument that the COVID outbreak has slowed construction and therefore this is not the right time to adopt the ordinance, I would simply point out that contrary to that assertion, the COVID outbreak has not slowed production. For example, in 2019, before COVID, there were 82 single-family units permitted during the year of 2019. For 2020, assuming that building plans under review as of September 30th will likely be advanced to permits by December 31, there'll be over 100 single-family permits issued. That compares to 82 last year. This year, there could likely be 100. That's about a 25% increase in the permits issued. Same holds true for multifamily housing. In 2019, there were permits issued for 20 multifamily units. And as of September of this year, there are permits under review for 47 units, and which, if permitted by the end of the year, would more than double the permitted multi-units in 2019. That's pretty much my testimony and support. I did have a few technical corrections, which I forwarded to Doug, and he in turn has submitted them over to Mr. Stone. And so hopefully those will be resolved by the next meeting. I'd like to lastly add in my 30 seconds that I'm glad that we're doing this tonight as opposed to November 3rd. I've got enough anxiety dealing with November 3rd, November 2nd, with some results, and not have to worry about the results of this particular one as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Yeah, yes, the next city council meeting is November 2nd, not 3rd. So yes. All right. All right, let's see who next. Let's see, Lisa Rogers.
I will hold my comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I will hold my comments until the November 2nd meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I know we've also got in your packet, there's a note, a written comment from Philip Higgins. And I think that's it for written comments. Ezra, are you on the line? Would you like to comment?
Good evening, Mayor. Ezra Hammer here with the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland. Congratulations, everyone, for sitting through a long city council meeting. I know you're all working hard tonight. Mayor, if it pleases you, I'll hold my comments until the continued hearing as well.
Okay. All right. Well, Ezra, thank you very much. And everybody, Ezra's a new dad relatively soon, so he's not getting a lot of sleep. So any sleep he can get, I'm sure he's happy with. So anyway,
thank you, Mayor.
November 2nd, Ezra.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Given that, I think, Sue, that's what I've got. Do you have
No,
other?
we had one who registered at 7:30. Jesse Nemec is still on the line from
Okay.
JT Smith. So
All right, Jesse, are you on the line?
I am.
All right, we are ready for your comment when you are.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Appreciate you taking the time for a late evening. I'll do my best to be brief. My name is Jesse Nemec with JT Smith Companies. We have a couple of residential housing projects going on in Newberg right now, Rogers Landing Apartments and the Crestview Crossing project. As some of you may know, we've been developing and building housing in the Portland metro area for about 30 years. And we've been working hard to provide attainable workforce housing in Newberg and throughout the Portland metro area. 2 years ago, when we were in front of you presenting the Crestview Crossing project, we had no idea that there was going to be a construction excise tax contemplated, nor did we believe that we were going to be trying to deliver this project in the middle of a global pandemic and record high lumber pricing and stress on the labor workforce and things like that. But here we are. And at the time, we had decided that we wanted to be part of a housing solution in tangible ways beyond just increasing the supply of economical housing to 295 more households. And we offered to deed restrict the value of 5% of our lots. And so Jeff Smith and I have been thinking really hard about this for quite some time, and have really kind of been looking at our pro forma, and it looks a lot different now than it did 2 years ago. So my simple ask is this, that if you do pass this construction excise tax ordinance, that projects that were land use approved prior to the adoption, or at least those that are offering some sort of affordable housing, be vested under the old tax rate without the construction excise tax. Otherwise, we're going to regretfully have to withdraw our offer to deed restrict a percentage of our lots, because we simply can't afford both. And that's all I have.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Nemec. Sue, anyone else?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Can I just leave? Do I have to
Mr.
close?
Mayor?
Sorry, go ahead.
One other thing. I just want council to be aware that I have received some additional comments that would come back in your packet in November. One from Merrill Kunkel, another one from Robert Suppy.
Okay.
Because I had let at least one of them know that I would respond to their comments tonight, but since we're going to defer, I will work on that for the next iteration.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And again, anybody else listening, if you'd like to make comment on it, we will continue the public comment on November 2nd. Truman, at this point, do I leave public comment open then? Or how do we move from here?
You can either you could either close it and reopen it at the next meeting, or you could, as part of the motion to carry this to the next meeting, include in that motion that continued public comment.
Okay. All right. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I can go. Yep, I motion to carry public comment over to the November 2nd continuation.
Okay. And continue the legislative hearing, correct?
Correct, and continue the legislative hearing, yes.
Okay.
Second.
And second, Denise, was that you? Denise, okay, Denise with a second. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by raising your left hand. All right, it looks like that's unanimous, Sue. All right.
Got it.
Now, do we need to then continue the other, that we have not opened the other hearing on the SDCs?
That is correct.
Okay, you need a motion for that as well, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so let's, folks, if someone would like to, this is ordinance 2020-2869, an ordinance amending chapter 13 of the Newberg Municipal Code to modify systems development charge regulations. We'd like to continue this one also to also November 2nd, Doug? Do we have?
That is correct.
Okay, also to November 2nd. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect? Now's your chance. Stephanie's reaching, I see it.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would move to continue ordinance number 2020-2869 to our next council meeting on November the 2nd.
All right, and Elise with the second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your left hand. All right, it looks like unanimous. All right, and then I think we've got a birthday thing, right? Here we go, here's Sue. All right, and then we will, and the council committee, I know we were gonna do committee appointment process. We will discuss that as well on November 2nd, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That was a council business item, not a particular motion. All
No.
right, Sue, it's all you.
So this is my attempt at a volunteer recognition campaign for the year. Because last year when I came to the council and talked, I thought, we'll get birthday cake and, punch. Then March came. So I tried to think creatively of a way we could do it without getting everyone together, because obviously we can't. And so I came up with this idea. Each of the committees that you have has a birthday. So this month it's Citizens Rate Review, which is 25 years old, and Historic Preservation, which is 7 years old. And so, ta-da, there it is. Upcoming months, we'll have different committees. We have a couple of birthdays in March and I think one in April. So this is just a little thank you to the committees and the volunteers who put in the time to help make the city run. And Lacey's going to be putting this out on social media as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, are you going to read the names of the volunteers or do you want me to?
Oh,
do that?
sure.
Do it.
Okay.
In your best
Citizens
radio
rate
voice.
review. Yeah, I'm chewing on candy too, so I apologize for that.
Perfect.
It was established October 2nd, 1995. This committee reviews city rates for water, sewer, and stormwater. They meet every other year. So thank you to the current CRRC members, Lozelle Mathai, Adam Lundstrom, Nick Moraes, Ned Knight, Bill Rourke, and Ron Sinicki. And Historic Preservation was established October 17th, 2013. They advise on historical properties and would like to thank the volunteers for that committee, who are Barbara Doyle, Rick Fieldhouse, Ryan Howard, Gary Linhart, Chuck Zikafus, and Asher Tatsumi.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, thank you to all of the many volunteers that help us do the work that we do. It really can't be done without you. So thank you. Anything else on here that we need to do this evening, or are we all?
I have a chat from Elise saying
there's
she wants to
something in
make
the
a
chat.
comment.
What do I have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elise
Okay,
would like to
yeah.
make a comment before we end.
Okay, yes, please. Elise.
Well, I was raised to clean up my crap before I go to bed. So I just wanted to clarify a point that I was trying to make and didn't articulate it very well during the childcare conversation. And that I just really want to make sure that Rick specifically didn't interpret my comment of if we voted no, that we'd be closing the door to this conversation, because I think we can all agree, every one of us cares about childcare. I mean, all of us are passionate about social disparities in our community. I did feel like the conversation for the two people of color on our council, I did feel like maybe comments that were made were spoken over by either myself or I don't know. I didn't feel great about the way that conversation ended. So I guess I'm just going to put that out there, that I hope that we all understand that we're all probably passionate about that subject. And I'm sorry if anything that I said didn't come off in the most eloquent fashion.
Well, thank you for that. And I will agree. I will say the same. And yeah, I will leave it at that. So, all right. Anything else? Anyone else?
So, if I might, I'll also, I guess I'll apologize for my language as well, if in the spirit of apologies, and also wanted to see if we could just have one quick opportunity to name counselors to the pension committee, because we were hoping to have a meeting in November. And so if we can do that now, we have the opportunity to schedule with those individuals. So that would be the one point of business that we might want to accomplish, if that's possible.
Okay, awesome. And I think Denise and I are assigned to it now, pension
That's
subcommittee.
correct.
And we need one other person who would like to talk about pensions. It's a one meeting, right?
One meeting.
Yeah, one meeting.
And you get to be with Matt.
And
He was
you-
very funny.
All
Yeah.
right, I'll do it.
If I don't see hands,
I'll be there.
Yep.
If I don't see hands flying up, I'm going home.
I love
Mike said
working
he'd
with
do it.
Matt.
I
He's
heard
very
him.
funny. Makes it
If
very
Matt's
interesting.
there, I'm there.
Yeah.
Okay, there it is. You're done.
But Truman has to come along too. Truman's
there
the
you go.
homie.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. So you got it. You got Bryce.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. All right. What else, folks? Every time we'll just try to do it better, right? We'll do it better the next time. And the next time is November 2nd, the day before a day that might live in infamy. No, that's December 7th. That's another city council meeting. But anyway, all right. We will see you all. Thank you. Thank you again, as always, for all you do. And that's literally, that's for staff, that's for volunteers, and that's for you all that's have the pleasure of sitting on council. So thank you. And everybody listening in, thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.